becoming infinitely stronger starting from Marvel. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story and all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 301 I offer raw stones to the Empire. Within the Milky Way, Captain Marvel radiated golden light, his eyes coldly glaring at the guard before him as he questioned him. The guard circulated his internal energy, unleashing a sharp blade of energy, only to have it shattered by the energy shield surrounding Captain Marvel. Sensing the depletion of his energy, a strange light flashed in Captain Marvel's eyes. This strength was indeed impressive, no wonder he could rule the entire Milky Way. This guy was probably a top expert from some empire. He had almost been injured. Seeing his full force attack shattered, the guard, knowing he was no match, didn't resist and naturally lowered his hands. Captain Marvel showed no urgency, instead looking at him with a "you're doomed" gaze. "Aren't you afraid? If you don't speak up, you're going to die." Seeing the guard's lack of fear, Captain Marvel's brows furrowed deeply as he threatened. "Afraid of what? I'll die on my own without you lifting a finger," the guard roared. His name was Feng Da, and he had only joined the army 3 days prior to begin his mission. It was precisely because of his low seniority that he was assigned to a mission stationed on an alien planet. Otherwise, who would work overtime instead of taking a holiday? On his first day in the army, the handbook stated that if you encountered an enemy you couldn't defeat, don't worry, just die. After all, you still have a captain above you, then a platoon leader, a division commander, a company commander, and then a general, a president, and a super president. If you encounter difficulties and still can't win after trying your best, then die. As long as you don't commit any fundamental errors, you will be resurrected later. Therefore, at this moment, falling into Captain Marvel's hands, Feng Da felt no panic, but rather regret. It was a pity that he had only been in the army for a short time, and with Christmas approaching, he hadn't even received the normal enhancement. As a result, he had been so humiliated as to be defeated by these natives, which was simply outrageous. After being resurrected, he would probably be laughed at by his teammates for a long time. As he spoke, Feng Da's blood explosion technique was activated to its limit. Under Captain Marvel's incomprehensible gaze, his body seemed to swell up as if inflated, and then suddenly exploded. Boom! In an instant, everything within 1,000 meters radius turned to white, barren and lifeless. Amidst the smoke and dust, Captain America's body broke through the smog, feeling utterly bewildered. What was wrong with this guy? Why did he self-destruct after only a few words? Was he really that temperamental? After searching around, she followed her memories and flew towards a planet inhabited by life. She needed to find out what was going on. On Earth, in New York, a massive palace had been moved there using the great power of the earth and wood element. Bai Ye sat on a chair inlaid with infinity stones, flanked by Stark, Kingpin, his woman, and the members of his chat group. Outside the palace, at a long banquet, the diners weren't ordinary citizens, but officials from all over the world. Due to the large number of people and security concerns, ordinary imperial civilians had long been moved to other cities to sit at the alien table. The program host outside was currently broadcasting live to the entire galaxy with a tense atmosphere. Before this program, the umbrella of 10,000 people had already been shown. This meant everyone in the entire galaxy had written their birthday wishes for Bai Ye on umbrellas in their native language, and now it was time for the singing segment. The male and female hosts wore impeccably formal smiles and said, "On this festive occasion, we should remember His Majesty's kindness. Without His Majesty, we would still be living in dire straits. His Majesty's kindness can never be repaid in a lifetime, so we present the next program. I offer primal gems to His Majesty." As soon as they finished speaking, a vibrant song rang out, and a little girl walked onto the stage, holding a handful of infinity gems, singing passionately to the camera. Bai Ye. To be honest, to maintain the surprise, he hadn't looked at the program or anything, so he wasn't prepared for any of the following performances. Looking at the crowd watching the show with him, Bai Ye didn't say anything. He just thought to himself that he'd rather spend his birthdays alone from now on. Having others wish him a happy birthday was too awkward. He'd learn from that experience next time. Soon, After 3 agonizing minutes for Bai Ye, the song I offer primal gems to His Majesty came to an end. But you think that's all? Not at all. Because this is just one song in the program. The next song seamlessly switches to The Empire Will Never Fall and Live Long and Enduring, sung by Kingpin and Rodriguez. Then, Happy Birthday, Your Majesty is sung by all the officials of the plain white banner of the old empire. Bai Ye, are you kidding me? In the audience, Wen Kai and Chu Xing are watching the program intently. Especially the backup dancers, whether they are blonde, blue-eyed foreign girls or delicate Chinese girls, they are all the most beautiful in the empire, making them unable to look away. Wen Kai whispers, "Senior brother, Master's emperor friend is too grand. Even his birthday is such a grand affair, otherwise, how could he be an emperor?" Chu Xing says enviously, "I want someone to celebrate my birthday like this in the future." Bai Ye, who is being envied by the two, "I feel like I can't take it anymore. What should I do? Where is the time stone? Help me." After several songs, the song and dance performances finally ended, and the next act was a stand-up comedy routine called Breaking the Three Vulgarities. It mainly discussed the humorous differences in customs between Earthlings and aliens, both citizens of the White Empire. After the stand-up comedy began, the Avengers, Endgame opera performers sat up straight, a month of intensive practice culminating in this performance. Everyone must be prepared. The performance can't have any problems, especially Thanos, the director said, looking at Thanos in the corner, half his body damaged by the Infinity Stones, dressed in incredibly ancient clothes like an old farmer. "You'll die twice in this scene. Don't let your first death cause problems for the rest of the performance." "I understand. I'll perform as I have before," Thanos replied sternly. "All right, everyone get ready. After the star explodes, you'll all be ready to go on stage," the director said seriously. Soon, after the dance and stand-up comedy performances, at noon, the entire sky suddenly went dark. Everyone instinctively looked up and saw the sun seemingly being dragged away into deep space. "The sun is gone," someone couldn't help but say. But then the host reassured everyone, "Don't worry, everyone. For the sake of the rest of the program, we'll temporarily remove the sun. Please enjoy the show." The Milky Way explosion. As the host finished speaking, in the distant sky, spanning billions of miles, the light from thousands of stars destroyed 10 minutes earlier barely reached Earth, illuminating the night sky like a white canvas. Chapter 302 has already been thoroughly reviewed. Gazing at the image in the night sky created by the afterglow of thousands of stellar remnants, traveling billions of miles to reach Earth and illuminate the entire hemisphere, even Bai Ye couldn't help but nod silently. Finally, something interesting had emerged. Within the entire solar system, thousands of stars coexisted at this moment. The energy released after each explosion was enough to destroy the entire solar system. If the slightest mishap occurred, the entire solar system and everything within tens of light years would melt into a furnace of energy. But bound by the Infinity Stones, layers upon layers of barriers enveloped and restrained these stars, limiting their gravity, suppressing their temperature, and confining their orbits. Even the light released after their explosions was modulated. The color emitted when a star burns depends on its surface temperature. Red dwarfs have a surface temperature of around 3000 degrees Celsius, so they appear red in the spectrum. Yellow dwarfs have a surface temperature of 6000 degrees Celsius, appearing yellow. The same applies to white dwarfs at 10,000 degrees Celsius and blue supergiants at 20,000 degrees Celsius. These stars, originally drained and capable of unleashing their energy freely, were never free, even in their death. Instead, they were restricted and suppressed, their light regulated to meet the needs of the White Empire, illuminating the sky. The same light, depending on distance, altitude, and atmospheric refraction, could appear in various shades such as snow white, off-white, pure white, and ivory white. In the image of the Milky Way explosion, the snow-white skin was the Emperor's, the golden light was His Majesty's eyes, and the azure blue was His Majesty's robes. Interspersed among were embellishments of planets of different colors, lifelike and reaching the pinnacle of beauty. One could directly see the whiteness and rosy glow of the skin on the white night in the image through the combination of different light. "How magnificent!" Chu Xing couldn't help but exclaim, looking at the image in the sky. At this moment, most people were admiring the magnificent scene before them, without appreciating the meaning behind the image. Only Vegeta and the others stared in astonishment. They could clearly feel the helplessness of stars, originally built up over billions of years, being forcibly drained of all their energy before exploding in a devastating explosion, a crushing technological gap. Even if Vegeta and Goku could shatter a star with a single, powerful blow, to create a painting with the effortless ease of thousands of stars afterglow, even as Super Saiyan gods, would be impossible. The entire scene lasted for several seconds, after which the thousands of stellar remnants, no longer of any use, vanished with a snap of their fingers. The sky regained its light, and the sun, which had been pulled away, hung high in the sky once more. The male and female hosts returned to the center of the arena, smiling as they announced to the galaxy's entourage, within the territory of the White Empire, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has recently become a popular topic of conversation, with the latest installment being called Avengers: Infinity War, and on Your Majesty's birthday, we will be staging a live drama of Avengers: Endgame. Your Majesty, please enjoy. The host's words startled Bai Ye slightly, then a look of helplessness appeared on his face. Enough had been enjoyed. Hurry up and take it away. Bai Ye, so, on my birthday, I'm going to watch Avengers: Endgame for over 3 hours with other people. Your Majesty doesn't like it. Noticing Bai Ye's expression, Rodriguez leaned closer and whispered, "It's alright, the movie is good, but I've already seen it 3 times. I hope this play will give me a different surprise than the movie," Bai Ye said casually. These words immediately made Rodriguez's expression serious. After giving Kingpin a wink, he left a clone behind and flashed out of the palace. "Why did you call me out?" Kingpin asked curiously. "Your Majesty is tired of Avengers: Endgame. Do you have anything new to do?" Rodriguez inquired. "What are you thinking? The Avengers: Endgame play has already started. To avoid trouble, this program can't be cancelled, otherwise, where will your Majesty's face be?" Kingpin said speechlessly. "Then can the script be changed? Write a script on the spot? What if it turns out bad? It's already on, we can only make do, and then we'll apologize afterwards. What else can we do?" Kingpin said. Sigh, who the hell approved this proposal in the first place? So much effort wasted, and they produced such a mess, Rodriguez sighed. Kingpin recalled, "It seems like it was Stark. Damn it, Stark, that Gillespie, is a traitor who ruined the country," Rodriguez lamented, taking advantage of His Majesty's favor to produce such a rotten mess. But what the two didn't realize was their own problem. Their own attempts at a duet like "The Empire Will Never Fall in a Land of Enduring Rule" weren't much better than Stark's, almost making Bai Ye turn around and leave in embarrassment. "Bai Ye, damn it, since I got my cheat system, I've never suffered so much. Either I'm incredibly embarrassed, or I'm left on the sidelines." Meanwhile, Captain Marvel, wanting to gather intelligence, followed her memories and traversed a wormhole towards the civilization she remembered. But upon arriving, she saw only devastation, devoid of any signs of life. The once radiant star, now drained of its energy, its iron nucleus transformed into a black hole, turning the entire civilization into a dead zone. The Audra civilization, Captain Marvel floated in the air, her eyes filled with rage as she watched the once vibrant starfield turn to death. What horrific atrocities had this White Empire committed? To rule was one thing, but to utterly destroy an entire civilization was another. At this moment, she was unaware that the original Audra civilization hadn't vanished, rather, the entire planet had been relocated to a new starfield. After all, a highly complex work of art like the Milky Way explosion required extensive color adjustments before being presented to Bai Ye in its final form. Bai Ye and his team only needed to observe. The creators behind it had to precisely control the subtle differences between every color to present a perfect work to everyone. Before the final product was completed, the number of destroyed stars was 7,684,561. In pursuit of perfection, the Infinity Stones were nearly smoking from countless snaps during the trials. Thanks to Stark sending the painter's own clone to assist, they barely managed to complete such a massive stellar project. But Captain Marvel knew nothing of this at the moment. She only saw a civilization brutally destroyed by the White Empire. The White Empire of Earth? I will avenge them. Captain Marvel's radiant eyes burned with fury. Her black hair billowing in space, like a vengeful goddess. This time, she wouldn't seek the truth, but instead pressed on, traversing wormholes towards Earth. She intended to find out the whole truth there. Chapter 303 Writing a Messy Script. At Bai Ye's birthday party, as the Avengers: Endgame play began, the surrounding environment transformed under the illumination of the Reality Stone. The once grand palace vanished, replaced by the interior of a spaceship. Everyone felt immersed in the play, watching from a third-person perspective. I've seen it before, but at least it's somewhat original, Bai Ye thought to himself, propping his head up. In the scene, Future Stark, played by Future Stark, sat wearily on the ground, conversing with Nebula, played by Nebula. The scene was a transition from Avengers: Infinity War, after Thanos snapped his fingers, leaving Stark and Nebula stranded in space. Because he only needed to play himself, and with the experience and memories of countless acting masters in his mind, his performance was effortless. As Future Stark near death, Captain Marvel, an actor brought in from another universe, floated in space, gazing at the dying Stark. Shortly after, as the plot unfolded, the scenes and visuals were all moved by the Space Stone, and the predetermined scenes began to connect to the story. Captain America and the others, who had already mastered every plot point, every angle, and every step of the positioning, now seamlessly transitioned into the scene they had just witnessed and began the performance. Is this still a play? It's so real, Kimishima Kano couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, but in fact, it was all real. The scenes, the visuals, even the deaths were all absolutely real. Meanwhile, on the other side, Captain Marvel, traveling at full speed towards Earth, passed through wormholes and rushed towards the planet. Along the way, due to the holiday, there were few guards. However, after several attempts, she was discovered by the station's soldiers. Damn it, forcibly breaking into a major galactic transportation route. Stop right now, a guard shouted. But compared to Captain Marvel, whose physical body was now traveling at near light speed in space, their speed was no match. Compared to those incredibly slow spaceships, Captain Marvel completely outclassed them in both speed and agility. Merely sensing something approaching, Captain Marvel swept past the guards, flew into a wormhole, and then began a series of special node jumps. In just a few minutes, the guards, drenched in sweat, watched the unknown visitor approach the solar system. We're doomed. Report this quickly. Request the Infinity Stones, one guard shouted. But reporting took time. By the time the communication was relayed, a streak of light had already arrived in outer space. From space, a luminous shield could be seen enveloping the entire city of New York within the Americas region, exceptionally conspicuous. Is that it? Captain Marvel stared intently at the city, now transformed into a theater. After a moment's hesitation, she rushed into the theater. Behind her, countless pursuing guards wore grim expressions, but could only watch helplessly as Captain Marvel stormed into the theater. Captain, what do we do now? A soldier asked anxiously from behind. The man called Captain sighed. What else can we do? Such a grave mistake has been made, death isn't enough. Go back and prepare for punishment. Meanwhile, the New York theatrical performance had reached its final battle. Thanos, returning from the past via Pym particles, was currently crouching on the ground, carrying a large sword. His eyes filled with malice as he stared at the Avengers trio before him. For those who hadn't seen the plot and were holding their breath, a battle was about to erupt. But before that, an unexpected event occurred. A streak of light flashed across the sky, and Captain Marvel rushed into the environment created by the Reality Stone. Her appearance immediately drew everyone's attention. Even Thanos and the Avengers couldn't help but look up. Thanos and the others were bewildered. This script isn't right? What's wrong with Captain Marvel? Why is she appearing so early? What's next? Meanwhile, backstage, the production team was in chaos. The director roared furiously, "What's wrong with Captain Marvel? She's on stage 10 minutes early. Spider-Man and the others haven't even come on yet." "I haven't come on, director." At this moment, Captain Marvel, who had come from another universe, stepped out. The entire set froze again, followed by a deathly silence. What do we do next? The assistant director couldn't help but ask. What to do? What to do? How the hell am I supposed to know what to do? The script didn't say anything about it. The director, drenched in cold sweat, paced backstage. How about we just act it out like this? The screenwriter suggested. Huh? The director was taken aback. I mean, since this girl looks like Captain Marvel and has Captain Marvel's abilities, let's give her Captain Marvel's scenes, kill her off halfway through the fight. As the screenwriter spoke, he lightly touched his neck with his right hand, his eyes turning cold. That's the only way. Quickly notify the actors downstairs, the director said helplessly. On stage, Bai Ye, who had been somewhat bored because she had read the plot, perked up. Looking at Captain Marvel, who had barged into the scene, she turned to Stark and said, "A script changed at the last minute? That's quite creative." Yes, 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 Stark laughed awkwardly. In the sky, Captain Marvel was about to coldly question the White Empire, but the future Stark below interrupted her, saying, "Perfect timing. Quickly join us to kill Thanos." Thanos. Captain Marvel looked at the purple-skinned man. Although she had never officially met him, she had certainly heard of his name. It's Thanos. He traveled from the past to the present using PIM particles, wanting to destroy the entire universe with the Infinity Stones. We absolutely cannot let him get them. Stark did his best to smooth things over, trying to convey the plot to the woman in front of him. The entire galaxy was watching. He couldn't afford to give himself away. So, Thanos is the emperor of that White Empire. Captain Marvel frowned, sensing something was amiss, but the next moment, a knife appeared, aimed at her head. Thanos' attack interrupted her thoughts, forcing her to deal with him first. In the next instant, Captain Marvel transformed into a streak of light, rushing towards Thanos, while the director's cold voice rang in the ears of all the actors, "Use every means possible, while maintaining the character's persona, to kill this imposter Captain Marvel in the most plausible way possible." Bang! As the words fell, Captain Marvel and Thanos collided, each taking a few steps back. The next moment, Thanos roared and swung his sword down at Captain Marvel's head. Surprisingly, she tried to dodge, but Stark shouted from behind, "Captain, I'm here to help you." As he spoke, Stark blocked Surprising's path, forcing her to catch Thanos' slash with her bare hands. Meanwhile, Thor, wielding his axe, swung it directly at Thanos. After being dodged, the axe struck Surprising, sending her flying. Surprising, okay, so this is how you help, huh? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 304: The Vanishing White Knight. In New York, the battle continued. Captain Marvel's intrusion disrupted the plot, forcing the director to quickly bring all the resurrected beings from the Infinity Stones to the scene. Chaos erupted, and Captain Marvel found herself locked in a tug-of-war with Thanos. To ensure the imposter died quickly, Tony and the others shirked their duties, merely engaging Doctor Strange on the periphery. However, Captain Marvel, being a top-tier fighter from the original series, held her own against Thanos in a one-on-one fight. In direct combat, she wasn't only unlikely to be killed by Thanos, but also had a chance to turn the tables. What's wrong with these guys? Aren't they supposed to be fighting Thanos together? Why are they dealing with the minions around them? Captain Marvel grumbled, looking at her teammates who were just going through the motions. Unbeknownst to her, her perceived teammates had completely different thoughts. Stark, while also shirking his duties, frowned, thinking, "This won't do. Every second we delay increases the risk of being exposed. Why is Thanos so slow? I need to kill this woman quickly." Backstage, the director and others were even more anxious. The balance of power in this battle was too poor. How could Thanos possibly defeat so many people by himself? Infinity Stones. Thanos, hurry up and get the Infinity Stones. Just pry out the Mind Stone. The editor transmitted his voice to Thanos, instructing him on how to do it. Then, the editor transmitted his voice to Thor. "Thor, after Thanos gets the Mind Stone, you go and sacrifice yourself, making a mistake and accidentally getting controlled by Thanos' Mind Stone. Ryder, should I go and sacrifice myself? Would that be inappropriate?" Thor asked telepathically. "Just sacrifice yourself," the editor commanded. Subsequently, with teammates relentlessly sacrificing themselves, Captain Marvel's battle became increasingly difficult, with more and more enemies appearing. Watching Thanos, the controlled Stark, Thor, and Captain America with Thor's hammer attack her one by one, she truly couldn't hold back anymore. These teammates were better off just slacking off. Seriously, are you guys out of your minds? You haven't helped at all, and even if you just sat around, it would make things much easier for me, Captain Marvel thought angrily. But the current situation gave her no chance to breathe. In just a few moments, she was covered in wounds, and one wrong move could mean certain death. Realizing something was wrong, she tried to escape, but just as she took flight, Thanos leaped up, wielding a massive sword, and slammed her to the ground. Before she could even get up, a terrifying barrage of attacks relentlessly blasted the exposed Captain Marvel to death. Thus, Captain Marvel, seeking revenge against Bai Ye, didn't even get to see Bai Ye's face before being ganged up on and beaten to death by a group of actors. With her death, countless people backstage breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, they had killed her. Ah, she's dead just like that. A worried audience member watched Captain Marvel's death. After all, if even Captain Marvel was dead, how could Thanos possibly fight back? But then, the audience witnessed the power of editing. With the uncertain factor of Captain Marvel removed, everyone on set was an actor, and the director could decide who won with a single word. Then, Doctor Strange, who had been seemingly inactive, appeared and restored all the controlled characters to consciousness. During the battle, the plot gradually returned to normal. With a final, powerful snap of his fingers, Iron Man wiped out all the villains. Backstage, the director slumped into a chair, drenched in sweat. Directing was more tiring than fighting a battle. The psychological pressure was immense. Director, what do we do about the Avengers Endgame movie version that's so different from the actual plot? Which version should we use? A screenwriter asked. Use the original, of course. Just say today's version is a special birthday edition for His Majesty, and make some minor cuts, the director said, eliciting nods of agreement from those around him. That was the only option now. On stage, Bai Ye watched as the scene in the hall was restored, seamlessly transitioning from the play to other programs, and was somewhat speechless. Although I don't know what happened, there must have been something wrong with the play just now. Bai Ye propped his head up, looking at the programs below, deciding not to expose them and just pretend he hadn't noticed anything. In his heart, he no longer wanted to stay here, but was looking forward to the exciting little show tonight. As time passed, 2 more hours went by, and all the programs were finished. Finally, after Bai Ye casually said a few words into the microphone, the program was officially over. In the separate hall, the people who had watched the program gathered together to chat, and Wen Kai and Chu Xing were also discussing the movie. Kimishima Kana's eyes lit up and suggested, "Hey everyone, now that everyone's here, how about we all get together and take a picture?" "A picture? Of course, no problem," Sun Wukong agreed without hesitation. Then everyone around him agreed, and Xiaoyu was even more enthusiastic. At this moment, Bai Ye also walked in from outside. Hearing that everyone wanted to take a group photo, he directly brought Stark and the others who were working outside in as well. Soon, everyone was gathered together. Bai Ye stood in the middle, his hands gently on Xiaoyu's shoulders, surrounded by his group members and their friends. With Kingpin's warm smile, he gently pressed the shutter of the camera. At that moment, everyone's smiles were frozen in time. The group photo of dozens of people was developed shortly afterward. Kimishima Kana looked at everyone in the photo, turning to say something, but found that Bai Ye had vanished. "Where's Mr. Bai?" Kimishima Kana shook her head, puzzled. Hearing the question, Stark also looked around curiously. "Yeah, he was just standing there a moment ago. Where did he go?" Puzzled, Stark sent a message in the group chat and quickly received a reply. "Playboy, at Deep Blue, where did you go?" "Deep Blue, went to another world, don't worry about me, have fun and go back on your own." Huh? Everyone was stunned by Bai Ye's reply in the group chat. What was going on? At this moment, Bai Ye stood in the plaza of the main god space, his expression full of helplessness. Every reincarnator had to pay reward points if they stayed outside the main god space during non-mission hours. The reward points he had reserved before leaving had been used up over the past few months, so he was just teleported back by the main god. Looking at the reincarnation plaza in front of him, Bai Ye decided to temporarily abandon the idea of going back since he was already here. Chapter 305 Covering the Sky. On the main god plaza, the crowd remained bustling. Countless reincarnators crowded together, all looking up at the golden curtain in the sky, choosing a world. Bai Ye stood in the crowd, attracting everyone's attention the moment he appeared. His actions here a few months ago were not so easy to forget. Now, his appearance was exactly the same as it had been a few months ago, causing the surrounding reincarnators' hearts to stop, as if they had seen a ghost. Although they didn't know if someone had disguised themselves or put on makeup, the people present still retreated silently, wanting to leave. As they left, some reincarnators sent messages to their factions, wanting to remind the first reincarnator of this planet that he had returned. Of course, their actions did not escape Bai Ye's notice, But he ignored them and stayed where he was, thinking about what he should do. Since I'm already here, I might as well just pick a world and play around, Bai Ye thought seriously. After all, what else could he do in the main god space? He could only go to a new world, or go back to the original world, find Tatsumaki, and play some cards. Bai Ye planned to complete a mission before returning. So, he looked up and began browsing through the golden curtain above him. There were still countless worlds, like a galaxy of stars, but with Bai Ye's current level 10 strength, the choices were very limited. It was a pity the god of war had power limitations, otherwise, Bai Ye might have explored some of the worlds. However, I now have self-limiting superpowers. Can the god of war judge my strength? Bai Ye pondered, then controlled his power to decrease. But he soon discovered that no matter how low he suppressed his strength, the lower-level worlds were still inaccessible according to the god of war's judgment. It seems the god of war's power is higher than my superpowers, Bai Ye reasoned. This was quite reasonable, considering that the mutant abilities Bai Ye developed in Marvel were at most on par with Marvel itself. The god of war, however, could mark the Marvel Universe coordinates and directly pull people in, so it was normal for him to see through his abilities. Then which is stronger, the power panel or the god of war's space? Bai Ye couldn't help but think, but there was no opportunity to compare. Browsing through the world above, a pop-up appeared in Bai Ye's eyes. Your strength is determined to be the strongest on this planet, meeting the conditions for participating in an inter-domain mission. Do you wish to participate in a team mission, yes or no? This prompt, Bai Ye stared at the pop-up window, slightly taken aback. He had previously wondered what would happen to reincarnators on other planets, since the development of reincarnators was based on planets. Would there be any interstellar wars or something between different planets under the arrangement of the main god? He hadn't expected that such a thing actually existed. Without hesitation, Bai Ye placed his hand on the or option, but nothing happened. TCH, so stupid, Bai Ye curled his lip in disdain, his desire to see something strange happen dashed. He raised his hand again and placed it on agree, and in an instant, everything went black before Bai Ye's eyes, and he vanished. Reincarnator number 1 agrees to participate in the interdomain mission. World number 7 unexplored. Mission participants meet entry requirements. Entry approved. Loading preliminary mission information for this world. In the darkness, Bai Ye's consciousness felt that several seconds had passed. When his vision brightened again, he found himself in a modern hotel. Before him were men and women of different appearances, 10 people in total, including Bai Ye himself. They were calmly looking at each other. Then, a man with a warm expression and extremely refined manners spoke. Hello everyone, I presume you are all the best on your respective planets, each with your own pride. However, this is a team mission, at least on the surface there is no conflict. I hope everyone will cooperate sincerely, but also refrain from sabotaging each other in secret. The man's tone was gentle, but the surrounding reincarnators did not underestimate him. After all, those present were all the best on their respective planets. No matter how refined and kind they looked, they were all ruthless characters, who knew what trump cards they held. But Bai Ye was pondering another question. Why did all these guys look exactly like humans? Different worlds, different planets, yet all the reincarnators are human. Does the Supreme God have some preference when selecting reincarnators? As for language, the reincarnator who spoke was using a language Bai Ye had never heard of before, but it was understandable thanks to the Supreme God's translation. Just as Bai Ye was pondering this, another reincarnator chimed in. Alright, although it's called a cooperative mission, the specific details haven't been explained yet. Let's discuss it after we come out. Everyone agreed, and after waiting quietly for a few more seconds, the Supreme God's mission arrived as scheduled. This ordinary planet, unchanged for 4.5 billion years, has been parasitized by the extraordinary. A company called Otherworld was established 3 years ago, subsequently releasing its first online game, Gulong Heroes. People were astonished to discover that the power and skills gained in the game would appear in reality on a one-to-one basis. Flying over rooftops, plucking flowers from the sky, all beyond the physical limits of carbon-based life forms were readily available. A great era of online games had begun. Main quest, exploration, quest description. In 3 days, Otherworld will release a new online game, covering the sky. Quest requirements, reincarnators must achieve a top 10 ranking across all servers in the online game covering the sky. Quest reward, 100,000 reward points. B-level privileges, Quest penalty, annihilation. The reincarnators present quickly reviewed the quest details, their expressions slightly strange. The way Otherworld released its online game seemed similar to the main god space, and the players on this planet were the reincarnators. The mission is called exploration instead of a climbing to the top. Could this Otherworld be a competitor of the main god space, sending us, their elite employees, to gather intelligence? One of the reincarnators thought to himself. Most, however, focused their attention on the B-level access level. Covering the sky, Bai Ye, having quickly scanned the mission, narrowed his eyes slightly at the name of the online game. Combining this with a previous online game, Gulong's Hero's title, it was basically confirmed to be that world. However, although I know which novel it is, I don't know the plot. Bai Ye's brain froze. After all, online novels start at several million words. In his previous life, he was just a teenager under 20, with his own studies and life. Watching movies and anime was one thing, but where would he find the time to read those online novels that were millions of words long? At most, he only knew the general plot, such as the Dark Turmoil. Chapter 306 The Female Characters of Shrouding the Heavens. After reviewing the mission, Bai Ye focused his attention on the room in front of him. Since the 10 people didn't know each other's personalities and distrusted one another, they all fell into a brief silence after reading the mission. Seeing this, Bai Ye didn't hesitate and directly asked, I have a question. What is the B-level privilege mentioned in the rewards? His words attracted everyone's attention, and everyone looked at him, then couldn't help but laugh. Looks like this brother is participating in a mission like this for the first time. A muscular man laughed heartily. The so-called privilege is a special right, allowing you to do things outside the rules. For example, staying in the real world indefinitely without consuming reward points is one of the privileges of C-level privilege, and the biggest advantage of B-level privilege is that it allows you to enter a low-level world mission every 3 months to play around, the muscular man explained with a smile. As he spoke, some of the reincarnators present showed expressions of understanding. Clearly, Bai Ye wasn't the only novice present, but only he showed it. This was equivalent to Bai Ye revealing his true self to these people, showing that he was a newbie on his first mission. Some reincarnators began to stare at him with ill intent, hoping to extract something from Bai Ye, the number one on another planet. Bai Ye, his secret exposed, waved his hand lightly and said, Thanks for the explanation, uncle. I'll be going now. You're leaving? Aren't you going to stay and discuss it? The muscular man asked in surprise. The others hadn't expected the young man to be so decisive, leaving after asking his question. I don't think there's any need for cooperation on this mission, it's just about completing a game. Bai Ye placed his foot on the windowsill, turned around, and smiled. I'll see you all again sometime. After saying this, Bai Ye leaped up in front of everyone and jumped down. After landing, under the unsurprised gazes of the surrounding crowd, Bai Ye put his hands in his pockets and walked down the street in a certain direction. As Bai Ye led the way away, the atmosphere became somewhat strange. Because of the mutual wariness and perfunctory exchanges, after a few words, they parted ways, ending on bad terms. After bidding farewell to the reincarnators, Bai Ye strolled through the streets, observing the planets. As he observed, he gradually noticed the differences between this place and the main god space. The lower classes on this planet were far more miserable. Because they hadn't acquired their powers in a short time and hadn't yet developed navigation technology, ordinary people at the bottom of the hierarchy lived alongside countless powerful individuals who had gained power from the game, including some at the planet-destroying level. In the main god space, the reincarnators killed each other, deducting reward points, and then eliminating them once those points were depleted. Here, however, there was no high-ranking being to regulate them. A single high-level battle could easily result in hundreds of thousands or even millions of deaths. The lower classes weren't like the residents of the Bitter Realm, NPCs who could be easily refreshed. Over the years, their numbers had drastically decreased from billions to just a few billion. Furthermore, the alien company that distributed the game didn't take responsibility. Those who first gained power monopolized the high-level game access. Ordinary people could only play games with average martial arts combat power. They had no access to mid to high-level games. Looking at the plight of the people on this planet, Bai Ye didn't lament the injustice done to the ordinary people. After all, he himself belonged to the privileged class, but with a high-end game market monopolized, playing covering the sky would probably require some effort. But before that, I'll ask around the group to see if anyone knows about covering the sky, Bai Ye thought. On the primordial continent, a figure suddenly appeared. Yang Kate, who had just returned from Marvel, looked at the newly built Taoist temple in front of him and nodded in satisfaction. Although he was just a nobody on the primordial continent, in his current small country, Yang Kate's level 4 strength was still enough to flex his muscles. As the abbot of the country's #1 Taoist temple, he had recently received 3 Dao and 3 Sheng of gold as offerings for a casual ritual. Next, I should focus on cultivating the technique the administrator gave me and quickly reach level 7, Yang Kate thought. But then an idea struck him: why don't I just send the cultivation technique to Bai Ye and let him deduce it? After all, the cultivation technique Bai Ye gave him was only a level 3 version of the purple cloud divine art. Who knows what he'd end up with if he threw his own technique at him? Just as he was pondering this, a private message sounded in his ear. Deep Blue, have you read Covering the Sky? It's the one written by Red Hair. Huh? Covering the Sky? Yang Kate was taken aback by Bai Ye's message. He'd just been thinking about Bai Ye, and now this message had come knocking. But why is he suddenly messaging me about the novel Covering the Sky? Newbie, did you transmigrate into Covering the Sky, sir? Deep Blue, yes, I probably will. But I haven't read the trilogy, so I don't know the plot. I'm asking you, newbie, is the first 300 chapters okay? The whole book has millions of words, and I haven't finished it. Deep Blue, didn't you say you were omniscient and omnipotent? You don't even know this? Yang Kate gave a helpless bitter smile. Like Bai Ye, he was also caught in the predicament of not understanding the plot. Those classic online novels often start at millions of words. In his original world, he was a corporate slave, working every day. Where would he find so much time to understand them? He could only be a cloud reader most of the time. No one told him in advance that he would transmigrate to the prehistoric world and then get access to the chat group. So how come the protagonists in those chat groups know everything? Deep Blue, never mind, then send me the first 300 chapters first. Group member, newbie, sent a red envelope to Deep Blue. After receiving it, Bai Ye immediately obtained the contents of the first 300 chapters of Shrouding the Heavens. Then he saw that the other party had sent another message: newbie, Li Zia Omen, Ji Zhao, Ken Yao, and Mai Changxi, Yi Qingwu, Fan Xian, Ruthless Emperor, Yaoqi Saintis, Holiner, Yaoxi, Zhuangmu. Deep Blue? What is this guy doing? Seeing a string of names, Bai Ye was dumbfounded. He just wanted some content. Why send all this nonsense? But Yang Kate had his own ulterior motives. After all, he knew a bit about Bai Ye's actions in Naruto not long ago. They were playing a huge game. Now that Bai Ye was in Taishan, he couldn't even imagine how much trouble he'd cause. Of course, he wouldn't show it outwardly. Newbie, sorry, boss, it was a slip of the hand, I've already deleted it. Have a good time in Taishan, Deep Blue. Bai Ye was so angry he laughed. Did Yang Kate think he was some kind of lecherous demon? Did he think he was the giant sun immortal venerable? So many people? And even the Western Queen Mother appeared. It was all too outrageous. Chapter 307 I Want Your Seat. On the street, after closing the chat group, Bai Ye looked at the game cartridges for sale on the streets. From Gulong Heroes to Kengan Arena, they were all games with average combat power. According to passers-by, games with high-level combat power, like Battle Through the Heavens, were currently monopolized by the upper class and only circulated among them. This was not done in secret from ordinary people, but openly and honestly. However, due to their lack of strength, the lower class, even if they were resentful, had no power to resist. After all, those people monopolized power itself. In front of those powerful beings who could destroy planets, sheer numbers were just easy prey. Walking around, Bai Ye stopped in front of a retail store with a sign that read Alien Realm. This was where the company behind Alien Realm released their games, an ordinary-looking retail store. Similar stores appeared every 100 kilometers, whether in cities or rainforests, and even missiles or nuclear bombs could not harm them in the slightest. Someone once experimented by digging up the floor tiles of a convenience store. Even after removing the entire foundation, the store remained stably suspended in the air, moving in sync with the planet's rotation. Inside each store, a game cartridge would appear on the shelves every minute, continuing until the shelves were full. Players would simply insert a cartridge into the game console and press start to enter the game, only to be ejected afterward. Because of this game-changing feature, each game store was heavily guarded by various factions, preventing others from approaching. What Bai Ye needed to do now was first acquire the necessary money and status, and then, 3 days later, on the very first day of the release of the game covering the sky, enter the game for public testing. Outside the game retail store, Bai Ye's approach immediately attracted the attention of the guards inside. "What's this guy up to?" A guard in a green short-sleeved shirt stood up, watching Bai Ye approach through the glass window. "Who cares what he does? If any lowly people come near, just chase them away. If they're still stubborn, cripple them," another guard in a purple sweater casually remarked. "No, I feel like this guy's aura is different. Be careful, things might go wrong," the man in green said. Hearing this, the purple-clad man looked up, his eyes becoming serious. After all, Bai Ye was definitely not an ordinary person in any way. In this world where human life is cheap, someone with that kind of appearance would either be the plaything or child of some big shot. After all, an ordinary person looking like that wouldn't have survived to this age without any problems. They would have been exploited by those big shots until they were clutching their backs and leaning against the wall. Neither of the two men present were idiots, and they temporarily abandoned their idea of treating him roughly. But they, who were preparing to be polite first and then resort to force, had no idea what Bai Ye was thinking. Looking at the tightly closed retail store, Bai Ye slightly raised his right hand, flicked his finger, and a terrifying gust of wind immediately swept up. Boom! A deafening roar, like the roar of 10,000 dragons, filled the air. Before the two stunned eyes, billowing smoke and dust obscured the view through the glass door. Light was blocked by the smoke, plunging the shop, unlit during the day, into darkness. The green-clad guard's fingers froze in front of him, his heart pounding. After a dozen seconds, the smoke and dust gradually dissipated, revealing a massive trench hundreds of meters long and tens of meters wide. The foundation beneath the retail store had completely vanished, leaving the entire shop suspended in midair. The two guards broke out in a cold sweat, fearfully wondering if they had opened the door earlier, and without the store's protection, would their bodies even leave a trace? Bai Ye, his feet treading on air, floated to the shop door, gently pushing it open, his gaze fixed on the two guards. "Go and summon the most influential person you can immediately. I need to speak with your faction." Bai Ye's tone was calm, but it sent a shiver down the spines of the two men. "Yes, sir, we'll take care of it for you right now." Nodding slightly, Bai Ye's gaze fell on the black box beside them, containing a stack of game cartridges that had been randomly generated that day. Because the game cartridges were randomly generated, the game types inside were very diverse, ranging from Gulong's heroes to Battle Through the Heavens. However, the lower the combat level of the game, the higher the probability of getting the cartridge. There were so many martial arts game cartridges that they were overflowing. Over the years, they even exceeded the current global population. Bai Ye stepped forward and casually picked up a Gulong's Heroes cartridge box. It contained an introduction to the game and some promotional materials. Taking the cartridge out, looking at the slightly larger than thumb cartridge, Bai Ye reached out and gently broke it. After feeling a slight resistance, it was easily broken into pieces. The two men who had been making calls to call for backup, under Bai Ye's orders, trembled slightly upon seeing this and dared not speak up to stop him. In fact, the cartridge's hardness was not something an ordinary person could easily break, only a power exceeding the highest combat strength in the game could destroy it. After finishing their calls, the two men eagerly pulled up chairs and placed them in front of Bai Ye, respectfully saying, "Please sit down, sir, don't tire yourself out." After waiting anxiously for several minutes, a long-bearded man in a tight-fitting outfit rushed towards them at supersonic speed. After his hurried run, upon seeing the damaged foundation beneath the retail store, his breathing became slightly heavier, and he stopped in front of the store. "My name is Li Han. Does this young man have some kind of grudge against our Sakuai strategy group? Perhaps we can resolve this through negotiation," the long-bearded man said. Bai Ye, too lazy to waste words, pushed open the shop door and walked out, repeating, "Now, go and call the person with the most influence you can." From the beginning, Bai Ye didn't think the two guards could summon any powerful figures. If their connections were that strong, why would they be relegated to guarding the shop? So he simply wanted to use the long-bearded man in front of him as a stepping stone to directly communicate with the highest level of the other party's faction. Looking at Bai Ye's calm, or rather, cold, gaze, and considering whether he could even get out of that deep pit, the long-bearded man, with a strong survival instinct, chickened out. After 3 consecutive rounds of stepping stones, with a violent roar from the sky, The air instantly heated up by tens of degrees. In the sky, a ball of extremely hot flame transformed into a human figure and crashed to the ground. The newcomer laughed loudly. Truly, a hero emerges from among the young. Which faction are you from, and what brings you to Guqing after going through all this trouble? Looking at the man in front of him, Bai Ye said calmly, "It's simple, I want your spot. Get down here." Chapter 308 Respect the Strong. Stiffness, silence. On the scene, the man who had just spoken with such arrogance seemed to have his throat tightly gripped by Bai Ye's words, unable to utter a sound. His subordinates around him instinctively took a few steps back, fearing a fierce battle would erupt, turning the surrounding area into a death trap. The man's brows furrowed, and after staring at Bai Ye with a strange gaze for a moment, he suddenly laughed. "Ha ha ha, of course, no problem. Since ancient times, the capable have ruled. As long as this young brother can defeat me in strength, then I, Guqing, will relinquish the position of leader of the Sequoia Conquest Group." "What's wrong with bowing down in obeisance?" Guqing's laughter returned to its hearty tone. His fiery red hair danced in the wind, like the sun god from Greek mythology, warming everything, physically. Bai Ye was surprised by the man's attitude. In his expectation, the man's anger would be justified, but now he seemed completely unconcerned. But this was the man's way of survival. In this world where human life is cheap, those without sufficient strength and a clear head cannot survive long. Going mad is a privilege reserved for the strong. The weak have no right to be willful. Every act of impulsiveness is a gamble with their lives. His Sequoia Conquest Group was merely a second-rate power on this planet. He had witnessed firsthand the head of a second-rate power, roughly equal in strength to his own, beheaded during a group meeting for a simple act of disrespect, unable to even resist. In a single night, he, who had previously been somewhat arrogant about his strength, witnessed the annihilation of a second-rate power like his own, his wife and daughters taken away and abused by the opposing leadership. Guqing had an epiphany. The concept of survival is a mask for the heart. Friendliness is an unbreakable principle, regardless of who one faces. Without understanding the other party's true strength, no matter how arrogant they are, treat them as a powerful individual acting mad and serve them with utmost care. If the other party is merely weak, then it's nothing more than losing face. As long as one's strength remains, those weaker than oneself, no matter how much they despise one, will have to serve one like a dog. But what if the other party is some peerless master? Or has a father or brother who is the leader of a first-rate power? Then one has escaped with one's life, a huge win. Therefore, over the years, countless forces have been reshuffled and reorganized. Only he, relying on his survival skills and shamelessness, has thrived in this world. And now, Bai Ye's attitude is so arrogant. In Guqing's eyes, daring to provoke him like this means either great strength or powerful backing, and one must be cautious. So, all he needs to do is smile. Guqing wore a hearty smile, smiling as he faced Bai Ye's provocation, like a gentle breeze. If Bai Ye demonstrates strength exceeding his own, or has some powerful background, he will bow down without hesitation. Conversely, if he later discovers that Bai Ye is inferior to him, then he can expect Bai Ye's furious revenge. There's no need to worry about temporary gains or losses. It has to be said that Guqing's performance at this moment successfully surprised Bai Ye, but the other party's sensibility saved him trouble. Bai Ye nodded slightly and said, "Seeing that you're quite sensible, I'll stand here and take 3 of your moves, and then you'll obediently hand over the leader's position." I made the right bet. Hearing Bai Ye's words, Guqing breathed a sigh of relief. Such arrogance, the other party was indeed a peerless expert. If he had been disrespectful just now, he would probably be dead by now. His survival strategy had once again allowed him to survive successfully. This was a victory for the survival path. After confirming that Bai Ye was a stronger expert than himself, Guqing was willing to give up his position directly. But he knew very well that the strong were unreasonable. The so-called 3 moves might be a way to show off his strength, and interrupting him might make him unhappy. He had plenty of experience in this regard. Therefore, Guqing shouted loudly, "No need for 3 moves, just block my full force attack. After 1 move, if you are unharmed, young brother, you are naturally more suitable for the position of leader than I am." As he spoke, Guqing's voice boomed like thunder, echoing throughout the entire city, maximizing the momentum of the battle. He was trying to create momentum for Bai Ye's rise to power, so that no one would object later. Of course, he also wanted to test Bai Ye, to see how capable Bai Ye was. The next moment, Gu Qing's body transformed into a humanoid flame with a temperature of tens of millions of degrees. The body, purely formed from flames, was like a real flesh and blood body under Gu Qing's terrifying control. Every texture and meridian was clearly visible, no different from the original flesh and blood body, making it impossible to tell that this was a humanoid form composed purely of plasma. In a short moment, the surrounding temperature rose by tens of degrees, as if entering an oven. This was under Gu Qing's deliberate restriction. Without it, the entire city would be scorched earth, and millions would be reduced to charcoal. Great sun azure flame, Gu Qing roared, and a sun appeared out of thin air once more in the sky. It was a white fireball, comparable to the energy output of a single second of the sun. Its energy swept outwards, easily scorching the entire planet's surface into scorched earth. But pulled by Gu Qing, it fell towards Bai Ye like a meteor. Someone's fighting again, what's going on? Hopefully, they'll tone it down, or millions more will die. Is it Sam City? I remember the leader of that faction was quite a clown. How come? At this moment, with Gu Qing unleashing his full power, his terrifying aura, capable of covering the entire Earth's surface, was immediately sensed by hundreds of powerful individuals around the world, some with strength comparable to or far surpassing his. To them, the planet beneath their feet was far too small. There were over a dozen individuals capable of destroying planets, not to mention the powerful individuals who could easily annihilate nations. With so many powerful individuals crammed onto this planet, any one of them going mad could potentially wipe out humanity. In this situation, a tacit rule circulates among everyone: fighting is allowed, but losses must be kept below 10 million per fight. Otherwise, incurring the wrath of the masses could lead to being surrounded and killed. At this moment, with Gu Qing's attack, countless powerful individuals arrived at the scene instantly. Their purpose was twofold: to ensure Gu Qing's attack didn't leak to other cities, and also to watch the spectacle. Facing Gu Qing's meteor-like attack, Bai Ye calmly raised his right hand. In a mere instant, Bai Ye's raised right hand collided with a coalescing fireball, then, as if squeezing tofu, he effortlessly crushed it on the spot. Seeing this, the powerful individuals who had come to watch the spectacle all trembled inwardly, their initial spectator mentality completely vanishing. Chapter 309, Weakening? Strengthening. This is a master, everyone present thought to themselves as they watched the young man silently extinguish Gu Qing's full force attack. To be able to neutralize the attack so easily meant he was definitely a top-tier fighter. But the young man's appearance was unfamiliar to everyone. Where did this strange master come from? Based on this assessment, those whose strength was comparable to or inferior to Gu Qing's began to quietly slip away, abandoning their spectator mentality. After all, a battle between strong individuals is not something to watch. You might think you're watching a show, but you could be a prop. Who knows if you might become a firework used to entertain the strong during the battle. Gently extinguishing the fireball with his force field, Bai Ye looked up at the stunned Gu Qing in the sky and said, "That counts as one move, right?" Bai Ye's words immediately brought Gu Qing back to his senses. Even though he was prepared, he hadn't expected the young man in front of him to so easily withstand his full force attack. In an instant, Gu Qing's attitude became even more serious, and he transformed back into human form from his flame form. He instantly tore through space, appearing directly before Bai Ye and saying, "From now on, you are the leader of the Sequoia Conquest Group. The entire group will follow your lead." To show his sincerity, Gu Qing knelt before Bai Ye and kowtowed 3 times, displaying utmost devotion. This earnest attitude left Bai Ye speechless, saying with a hint of exasperation, "You don't need to be so humble. No, this is basic respect for the strong." Gu Qing stood up seriously and said, "Leader, do you have any needs? The entire Sam City is your territory. As the leader of Sequoia, you can do whatever you want in the city without anyone interfering. I don't have any needs for now, but in a few days I need to obtain the game cartridge for covering the sky to enter the game, so I'll take over your group as well, to make things easier," Bai Ye said truthfully. Gu Qing accepted Bai Ye's reason without any surprise. After all, to him, whatever the strong did was right, and even if there were problems, it was the problems of the weak. Even if they wanted to have their way with his wife, he could still offer up his daughter with a smile, fearing that the strong wouldn't be satisfied. In Gu Qing's code of the weak, in this world, if you're unwilling to sacrifice your wife and daughter, someone else will force you to. Survival is everything. Therefore, facing Bai Ye's words, Gu Qing nodded vigorously and said, "No problem. We'll present it to you immediately after the game goes on sale in 3 days. Bai Ye nodded in satisfaction at having such a reliable subordinate. It was indeed comfortable to have someone to serve you. He didn't have to run around doing chores. Seeing Bai Ye agree, Gu Qing smiled and said to his underlings, "Today is a joyous day for our SYNOPSIS strategy group. We've gained an even stronger leader. Immediately prepare a grand gathering to reward our leader." Seeing that their former leader showed no resentment at their abdication, the underlings breathed a sigh of relief. A peaceful handover was the best outcome, and they immediately nodded and began preparations. A dozen minutes later, the entire city was mobilized, and a grand banquet was held in the city center. Hundreds of core members of the SYNOPSIS strategy group came to pay their respects. At the banquet, Gu Qing subtly inquired about Bai Ye's background. After all, only a handful of individuals worldwide possessed Bai Ye's level of strength, and the sudden appearance of someone previously unknown inevitably aroused curiosity. Bai Ye, however, was too lazy to conceal the truth, but revealing his identity would result in a deduction of points from the main god, so he directly told Gu Qing to keep quiet, which frightened Gu Qing into slapping himself a few times as an apology. Late at night, after the banquet ended, Bai Ye went to the room arranged for him. Looking at the mother and daughter sisters, not Gu Qing's, sitting obediently inside, he remained silent for a while before closing the door. The night was far from over. That night, not only in San City, where Bai Ye was located, but also in several other cities, multiple battles broke out. After Bai Ye took control of the city first, the reincarnators left on their own, developing their own presence in other cities. Strength allows one to thrive anywhere. After demonstrating their strength, these individuals either directly became leaders or became core members of their organizations. Although the intensity was being controlled, at least 10 million people on this planet perished in the aftermath of the battle overnight, resulting in a direct loss of 1% of the planet's population. This naturally caused countless powerful individuals to wonder where so many experts had come from. Aside from the first day, the following 3 days were eerily calm. Compared to reality, the game was the true battlefield. Through the gathering of information over these days, everyone understood the rules of these games. In every new game, no matter how strong a player's abilities were in other games, they would start from scratch. Their physical attributes and energy would be suppressed to the level of an ordinary person, but their other talents, constitution, comprehension, and bloodline would be retained. For the strong, even without power, with their talents and comprehension intact, they could regain their power in 3 to 5 years of training. The faster they returned to their strongest state, the greater their advantage. Furthermore, in the game, death was not true death, but a forced exit from the game. For the next day, players would be unable to log into any game, remaining only in reality, losing all the power they had gained in that game. Even if he logged back in, he would start from scratch with a blank account, beginning his training all over again. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Bai Ye had already been waiting at the retail store for the game's release. According to the game rules, the first 100 players to enter the game would receive the greatest benefits. This was a test of speed. As noon passed, Bai Ye looked at the newly appeared Covering the Sky cartridge and, with lightning speed, inserted it into the rectangular game cartridge. Whoosh! In an instant, the moment the cartridge was inserted, Bai Ye's figure vanished from his spot, entering the game space. In the pure black space, Bai Ye began to feel a force of rules swirling around his body, gradually suppressing his power. This ability was somewhat similar to Bai Ye's self-limitation, but it still weakened him, so. Panel, activate. Under Bai Ye's helpless gaze, the values on the panel began to fluctuate wildly. Name, Bai Ye. Lifespan? Strength, 8, 488, 588, 688, 7. Constitution, 8, 488, 588, 688, 7. Spirit, 8, 488, 588, 688, 7. Charisma, 1.4. Looking at the game stats, which seemed to be either improving or lowering his stats, Bai Ye sighed helplessly. Now it's confirmed, this game's rank isn't as high as my stats. Chapter 310 Reconstruction at the foot of the mountain. In a pure, empty space, countless players who had entered the game Covering the Sky were waiting. According to the rules, the first 100 players to enter, based on the order in which they inserted their game cartridges, would gain a significant advantage. They only needed to wait for the game to suppress all players' power to normal state before the game could officially begin. However, at this moment, all the players were astonished to find themselves trapped in this space, unable to leave due to the game's suppression of their power. This had never happened before, and all the players were filled with anxiety. Because each player was isolated from the others, everyone wondered if they were the only ones experiencing this, or if everyone was in the same situation. Meanwhile, in the space where Bai Ye was, he felt as if the game and the power panel were locked in a tug-of-war. Every so often, a powerful suppression would begin to gradually reduce Bai Ye's power. But then the power panel would forcefully raise his attributes. Then, with suppression and raising happening simultaneously, Bai Ye watched helplessly as his attributes jumped at a visible speed. Stop rising. Stop rising. If it keeps rising, I'll become invincible, Bai Ye thought helplessly as he watched his power surge wildly in a short time. If this continues, who knows how much his combat power will soar when he emerges? Perhaps he'll be the first person to worry about his strength increasing too quickly. Seeing his strength steadily growing, his three-dimensional attributes have already broken 9 and are approaching 10. According to the chat group's assessment, Bai Ye's strength has officially reached level 11, the stellar level. To avoid increasing too rapidly, Bai Ye had no choice but to actively shrink his strength. Without using his special abilities, Bai Ye used self-limitation to suppress all three-dimensional attributes to 1 point. It seemed the game couldn't handle it anymore, and seeing Bai Ye actively suppressing his attributes, it stopped pressing him. But Bai Ye was still planning to be mischievous, suddenly returning the suppressed attributes to his physical body, and the suppressed force that had just subsided reappeared. Getting impatient, Bai Ye couldn't help but smile, retracting the attributes, but his three-dimensional attributes still permanently increased by 0.1. This suppression isn't very effective. The more you suppress it, the stronger it gets, Bai Ye joked, and didn't pursue it further. If the game gets impatient and kicks him out as a bug, that wouldn't be good. Anyway, in his current state, he's not useless even without power. While waiting, the game returned to normal, arranging everyone and dropping them into 2 groups. The first group of 100 players was teleported to the vicinity of Mount Tai on Earth before the Kowloon Pagoda incident. The second group was dropped into a random kingdom in the Big Dipper. When Bai Ye and the others regained consciousness, they found themselves at the foot of Mount Tai. Countless tourists were bustling around them, climbing Mount Tai, which is revered as the foremost of the 5 sacred mountains. It was evening, the setting sun casting long shadows over the towering mountains, scattering dappled rays of light, a magnificent sight. Bai Ye stood there, lost in thought, observing everything before him. A gentle breeze blew, and a line of text appeared before him. Kowloon Pagoda will crash into Mount Tai in half an hour. Players are requested to ascend to the summit of Mount Tai in advance. The text appeared for a moment, then disappeared again after Bai Ye had read it clearly. Bai Ye knew this was a tutorial for new players, guiding them on their way to the game. Aside from the initial entry, players were free to explore on their own, even without following the prompts. Half an hour later? Then the protagonist and his companions should be almost at the summit by now, Bai Ye murmured to himself, as countless exclamations erupted around him. Hello, can I take a picture with you? Your figure is amazing. Wow, can I touch your hair? But why are you wearing a t-shirt with such long hair? Shouldn't you be wearing hanfu? You're so handsome. Do you have a girlfriend? A large group of men and women surrounded him, their eyes gleaming as they looked Bai Ye up and down, some even wanting to touch him. Originally, Bai Ye had blended perfectly into the environment and gone unnoticed by the game's design. However, his long, flowing hair and handsome appearance once again made him the center of attention. Not only him, but the other 99 players who had just entered the game were also speechless. According to the original fantasy game setting, they had specifically changed into ancient costumes for the occasion. The game unexpectedly transported them to modern society, specifically to the bustling foot of Mount Tai, where they immediately became the center of attention. Some players roughly pushed aside surrounding tourists, retreating to secluded spots to sit cross-legged and circulate their internal energy, attempting to gain power as quickly as possible through meditation. After all, according to the game's warning, the 9 Dragons Tower would crash to the ground in half an hour, and with their ordinary physical abilities, they simply couldn't climb to the summit of Mount Tai in such a short time. But the fastest method wasn't meditation. In an instant, panic erupted as one after another collapsed, lifeless. A dozen or so players, their eyes glowing crimson, absorbed this blood energy, using these people to quickly restore their power. Countless tourists at the foot of Mount Tai became the best nourishment to boost their strength. A miniature dark upheaval unfolded, terrifying chaos spreading in all directions. But this was merely a minor tactic. True powerhouses, with their superior innate abilities, recovered at a speed no slower than those using unorthodox methods. After all, the game's suppression only affects superficial aspects like strength, speed, and spirit. But if strength is lost, one can simply rebuild it, right? In a corner, a middle-aged man sat cross-legged, his body circulating energy, his cultivation level breaking through layer by layer. First level of Dao power. Second level of Dao power. Third level of Dao power. Since he was rebuilding a path he had already traversed, with the innate talent and understanding of a Dao Di, Battle Emperor, his cultivation was naturally unstoppable. As long as his energy was sufficient, there were no bottlenecks before reaching the 7th star of Dao Sheng, Battle Saint. It was simply a matter of accumulating quantity. People like this made up the vast majority of players around Mount Tai. Those who could enter the game in the top 100 were at least capable of easily annihilating surface-level experts. Converted to the game scale, that's equivalent to at least a king-level expert in the game covering the sky, making rebuilding incredibly easy. Most disdain taking such a minor path. Apart from reincarnators like Bai Ye, other local players had to rebuild their cultivation level after playing just one game. Having cultivated to this level, they had experienced at least 10 games, making rebuilding a breeze. In a short time, these meditating players were now radiating strange phenomena, frantically absorbing the surrounding energy. Above Mount Tai, the already scarce energy of Earth in this Dharma-ending age began to gather, even forming visible, 7-colored clouds. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311 Purple Key comes from the east for 30,000 miles. What's going on? The spiritual energy is converging on Mount Tai so obviously. There's a strange phenomenon in the sky, so much spiritual energy gathering. Could there be a rare treasure appearing in the direction of Mount Tai? I must go and see. This might be an opportunity for this old Taoist. At this moment, the cultivators on Earth, living in the Dharma-ending age, stared in astonishment at the spiritual energy gathering in the sky towards Mount Tai. The actions of these players had already caused astonishment throughout the entire cultivation world of Earth. Dozens of cultivators at the Dao Severing or even Saint levels were restarting their cultivation, and the effect was incredibly terrifying. Even the spiritual energy of the entire Earth could not support these people's cultivation. Because everyone was crowding together, the players began to compete with each other for spiritual energy. The spiritual energy in the sky began to show different colors, some yellow, some green, some red, some blue. But soon, some players had to stop, because troublemakers had arrived. The players who had been killing and absorbing energy at the foot of Mount Tai earlier were now approaching those meditating players with ferocious expressions. Compared to ordinary people, these players were the real source of nourishment, one of them being equivalent to hundreds or thousands of mortals. Furthermore, once these people are kicked out of the game, they will be unable to log in for at least a day. In advanced games like Covering the Sky, the time difference between the real world and the game world is roughly 1001. That means 3 years in the game are equivalent to only 1 day in reality. Imagine the magnitude of the nearly 3-year gap when these people re-enter the game. They might as well consider switching to a different game. In a corner, a player covered in blood approached the meditating figures, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Don't blame me, Mount Tai is too small to accommodate you big shots. Wait 3 years before you eat my exhaust fumes. The player's killing intent was overwhelming. As he approached, the seated figure coldly snorted and stood up. Looking at the guy in front of him, the man coldly snorted, "Damn dog, daring to disturb my cultivation. I'll not only kill you here, but I'll also blast you to smithereens in reality." As he spoke, the two bodies collided, becoming afterimages. On one side was a seasoned cultivator who had been meditating for 3 minutes, while on the other was a murderous demon who had devoured the blood and energy of dozens of people. For a moment, neither could gain the upper hand in terms of sheer power. The sharp gust of wind from their clashing palms sent surrounding furniture flying, and then a fierce battle ensued. Similar battles were taking place in many places around Mount Tai. Bai Ye, meanwhile, observed the surrounding fighting with curiosity. After all, It was the first time he had witnessed such a contest of cultivation speed, and he was quite intrigued. The tourists who had just gathered around had long since hidden themselves due to the carnage. Bai Ye was the only one present, making him stand out conspicuously. A moment later, a player with blood on his hands blocked Bai Ye's path. Looking at Bai Ye, who had been watching the whole thing, the player asked suspiciously, "What's going on with you, kid? You're not cultivating, and you're not killing anyone. What are you up to?" He naturally recognized Bai Ye. After all, he had been one of those who had come to watch Bai Ye's battle against Gu Qing a few days ago. "Go kill your men, don't bother me watching the show," Bai Ye said indifferently, completely ignoring the guy in front of him. "You brat, you haven't reformed your cultivation, what are you pretending for? Wait for the next game," the man sneered, rushing towards Bai Ye, a sharp burst of ki lashing out at him. Bai Ye simply raised his right hand without a ripple and lightly pinched. In the gentle breeze, the ki, sharp as iron, was easily crushed by Bai Ye's soft, white palm. The man's pupils constricted, his forward steps halted abruptly, staring at Bai Ye with a look of utter disbelief. "How is this possible? How did you do that? This guy clearly only had the physical abilities of an ordinary person. How could he possibly block my ki?" "Nothing is impossible," Bai Ye smiled slightly. "This isn't some kind of skill, you can think of it as rules or logic, though that might be hard for you to understand. Since you've interrupted my show, it's time to end this game," Bai Ye said, his smile fading, his meridian circulating as he began to cultivate. Bai Ye hadn't cultivated like this in a long time. His innate talent was linked to his physique, and his comprehension to his spirit. As long as his physical attributes improved, his cultivation speed would naturally increase. The last time he seriously cultivated was while training chakra in Naruto. Back then, Bai Ye, whose chat group level was 5, was praised for his chakra refining speed comparable to a tailed beast. Now, with his chat group level at 11, Bai Ye was recultivating. Everyone has a chance to improve 4.0 inches again. How fast would his cultivation speed reach? The answer was earth-shattering. As his cultivation began, Bai Ye's right foot took a small, sudden step forward. In an instant, the world changed color. A blinding purple light shot upwards from below, piercing the universe and illuminating the entire world. Everyone, whether fighting or undergoing cultivation, instinctively stopped, staring in astonishment at the purple pillar of light. The various spiritual energies that had just been gathered were dispersed beneath the pillar of light, then changed color, forming purple clouds. Atop Mount Tai, Yi Fan's climbing team was admiring the clouds. The sky, illuminated by the setting sun, displayed clouds of different colors, prompting everyone to marvel at the magnificence of nature and the existence of such a spectacle. But soon, a dramatic change in the celestial phenomena caused everyone's expression to change, for the weather changed too quickly. Purple clouds blanketed the sky, as if the spiritual energy of the entire planet was converging on Mount Tai. Under the light, the entire city glowed purple. If the purple clouds at this moment were the bright moon in the sky, the various colors of the clouds before were merely the glow of fireflies. At this moment, with Bai Ye's single step, the spiritual energy of the entire earth began to surge into his body and be absorbed, driving his strength to increase layer by layer. Level 1. Level 2. Level 3. Level 4. Level 5. Level 6. With just one step, Bai Ye's strength rapidly increased to level 6, then began to slow down. The spiritual energy within a radius of 10,000 meters around him had been completely absorbed. And the spiritual energy of the entire world began to converge here, which Bai Ye deliberately stopped absorbing. Watching the man who had just uttered those harsh words suddenly transform from an ordinary person into a monster with overwhelming power, the man's lips moved, but he couldn't utter a word. To this, Bai Ye simply smiled gently and said, "Let's start the next game." As he spoke, spiritual energy surged, and a purple aura 10,000 meters long suddenly swung out from Bai Ye's arm. After slicing the man to pieces, the mighty blade energy did not stop, penetrating deep into the mountain's belly, cleaving half of the main peak of Mount Tai in two. Chapter 312. What kind of strongman doesn't even dare to eat shit? With a wave of his hand, those who would have stood in his way to watch the show vanished, and Bai Ye looked back. Wherever his gaze fell, everyone stood frozen in place, staring blankly at him. The players who had been fighting tooth and nail were now comically huddled together, too afraid to move, lest any movement attract Bai Ye's attention. Most of the players recognized Bai Ye, He was the young man who had fought Gu Qing a few days ago. But no one could understand how this guy had recovered so quickly. Now, with Bai Ye's recovery, all the spiritual energy of the world was converging on this place. Areas outside Mount Tai, already depleted of spiritual energy, had become deathly wastelands. But here at Mount Tai, because Bai Ye had stopped absorbing in time, the spiritual energy had increased to an extraordinary level. Is it the effect of an item from the main god space? One of the reincarnators couldn't help but wonder. It was truly unimaginable how this guy had increased his strength to such a degree in such a short time. But no matter how hard it was to accept, the reality before them forced everyone to accept their fate. The handsome young man before them now held the power of life and death over them. If Bai Ye were displeased, he could easily slaughter everyone here, kicking them all out of the game. Moments later, the players stopped fighting amongst themselves and instead focused their guns on Bai Ye, prioritizing surviving. Otherwise, a 3-year hiatus would mean it would be too late to re-enter the game. A resolute glint flashed in their eyes. Facing this formidable enemy, they had to unleash all their trump cards, all their skills, and all their tactics. In an instant, the players who had been locked in fierce combat separated, rushing towards Bai Ye at breakneck speed. Watching this, Bai Ye's eyes gleamed with amusement, eager to see what these ants could pull off. What methods could these barely level 1 or 2 cultivators possibly use to survive against a level 6 player like himself? But then, Bai Ye was astonished to see that the players, who had just been so murderous, suddenly went weak in the knees, sliding to their knees and scraping a mark on the tiled floor before finally reaching Bai Ye. Godfather, one player slid to his knees before Bai Ye, tears welling in his eyes as Bai Ye stared at him speechlessly. A true friend is hard to find in life. You are more than just my friend, you are my guiding light. If you do not despise me, I wish to become your godfather, father. Your son has missed you, another player kowtowed, saying, from now on, I am your adopted son. As long as you don't mind, I will serve you for the rest of my life, boss. My recently acquired 36th concubine is a beauty of unparalleled grace. I haven't even touched her yet. I'd like to offer her to quench your thirst. If you're interested, my 35th concubine is also available for you to play with. Excited shouts echoed throughout the area, much to Bai Ye's astonishment. Those who were once powerful figures who dominated the world now had red eyes and tears, looking utterly pathetic. Several of them crawled towards Bai Ye, trying to cling to his leg and plead their case, but he kicked them away in disgust. It has to be said, this scene was somewhat beyond Bai Ye's comprehension. Those who were invincible and unparalleled just a moment ago were now so utterly submissive. Lacking any of the arrogance of a powerful figure, it was unheard of. But this was the path of the players, the path of survival. Resisting meant death, running away meant death too. Since death was inevitable either way, why not choose to survive? As long as they didn't die, losing face didn't matter. Compared to the 3 years of cultivation, losing face was insignificant, only power was real. These people were, like Gu Qing, pure social Darwinists. They identified with whoever was stronger. Under the guise of survival, the entire street was filled with people kowtowing, kneeling, and even trying to amuse Bai Ye. Just as they had resolved, they were using every means to survive. Some might think this lacked the demeanor of a true strong man. But in their eyes, if you can't even eat excrement to survive, do you deserve to be called a strong man? A strong man dares to be the first. Even if it means eating excrement, you must be the first. That was their spirit of strength. Bai Ye glanced at these people with some disgust, suddenly losing the urge to kill them. As long as they were a pile of excrement, no one would bother with them. He kicked away 2 who were blocking his way, then took a step forward, using the shrinking earth technique to ascend gracefully to the mountain top. Watching Bai Ye disappear into the distance, the players stopped kowtowing and kneeling, their eyes filled with murderous intent as they resumed their fighting. At this moment, there were still 20 minutes until the 9 dragons pulling the coffin crashed down Mount Tai. For them, 10 minutes to reach the summit of Mount Tai was more than enough. The rest was about quickly reducing their competitors and leaving only a few to ascend. While these players fought, Bai Ye reached the summit in just a few steps. At this moment, on the summit of Mount Tai, Ye Fan and his group were gathered, awestruck by the purple clouds that covered an entire city. This natural magnificence left them speechless. This beauty was worth lingering over. Some with cameras began taking pictures. Standing atop the Jade Emperor peak of Mount Tai, looking down at the myriad mountains below and gazing at the yellow river amidst the purple clouds, They felt their own insignificance and the vastness of the universe. Just then, Yifan's university classmate, Wang Ziwen, received a phone call. After answering, he walked to a corner and then shouted, attracting everyone's attention. Something bad has happened. I just received a notification that a serious incident has occurred at the foot of the mountain. The army is being mobilized to suppress it. We are not to come down the mountain now, we must stay here obediently, Wang Ziwen said seriously. No problem, the scenery here is great anyway, and we were planning to stay on the mountaintop for a while anyway, an old classmate said seriously. Now that a case has occurred, it's fine to spend the night here. After discussing it for a while, the group decided to stay on the mountain until things calmed down below. While these people were discussing under the cover of purple clouds, Bai Ye slowly climbed to the top of the mountain. Looking at the tourists lingering on the summit, Bai Ye's gaze swept around before settling on a small group. Although it was the first time he had seen them, Bai Ye immediately recognized these people as the ones who would be entering the Nine Dragons' coffin. After all, they were the main characters, naturally distinguishing themselves from the ordinary tourists in terms of temperament and demeanor, making them easy to spot when gathered together. As if sensing Bai Ye's gaze, Yifan and his group turned around and immediately noticed Bai Ye, who stood out from the crowd. Chapter 313 Nine Dragons Pulling a Coffin. Who are they calling Godfather? This person, at the summit of Mount Tai, following Bai Ye's gaze, Yifan and his group quickly noticed Bai Ye's gaze as well. In just one glance, they were all stunned by Bai Ye's extraordinary appearance. Is this kid a celebrity? He's so handsome, Lin Jia exclaimed. He's probably here to film a movie. He even wore a long wig, but he seems to be looking at us. Does anyone know him? I don't know, but how about we ask for an autograph? I feel like he'll definitely be famous in the future. The crowd discussed animatedly, but only Yifan felt that the boy in front of him was staring at him. There was a slightly condescending look in the boy's eyes. This guy is the protagonist, the future master of the sacrifice path. Bai Ye gazed at Yifan, nodded slightly in greeting, and then looked away. There would be plenty of opportunities to interact in the future. He didn't need to rely on this powerful figure, no need to try to get close. Besides, given his own actions, there was a greater chance that they would become enemies in the future. Judging by the abilities of those above the sacrifice path, they've probably already discovered me across the river of time. The only question is how many punches it would take to defeat someone above the sacrifice path. Bai Ye pondered this, unaware that he was currently protected by countless powerful figures. Unless Yifan's strength approached or surpassed that of the Marvel and DC universes, even if someone from the sacrifice path personally arrived, they might choke to death on a sip of water due to unforeseen circumstances. He's nodding to me, looking at Bai Ye, who was sitting to the side with his eyes closed in rest. This thought suddenly arose in Yifan's mind. Subconsciously, amidst the surprised gazes of his old classmates, he stepped out of the crowd and was the first to approach Bai Ye. When Yifan came to his senses, he found himself already standing in front of the young man. Observing the young man's face, his youthful skin and perfect features exuded the unique vitality of youth. Looking at the young man who was 7 or 8 years younger than him, Yifan hesitated for a moment before asking, "Young man, have we met before, huh?" Bai Ye looked up, confused as to why this guy had suddenly come up to him. But he still answered truthfully, "No, but we'll see each other often in the future." See each other often in the future. Yifan was taken aback, not understanding what the young man meant. It's normal not to understand now, you'll understand later. Bai Ye leaned lazily against the pavilion, speaking mysteriously. This answer left Yifan speechless. This young man was playing riddles on him, a working professional who had graduated more than 3 years ago. "Since you're here, sit here." Bai Ye casually patted the seat next to him, implying something. Yifan shook his head and refused, then returned to his old classmates' group. "So, what did you and that kid talk about just now?" Zhou Yu asked curiously. "Nothing much, just some casual conversation," Yifan said, feeling that his behavior just now was a bit strange. The group waited on the mountaintop, and tourists would occasionally come over to take photos with Bai Ye. Bai Ye smiled and nodded in agreement, but always maintained the most comfortable and lazy sitting posture, not wanting to move, letting the passengers come up to take pictures themselves. Despite their speechlessness at the sight of this somewhat eccentric young man, the tourists still gathered around for photos. While they waited in silence, the battle below had concluded. A man in a blue robe, covered in blood, ascended Mount Tai with incredible speed, using the heavenly gang step technique. Upon seeing Bai Ye lounging lazily, the man froze, instinctively wanting to kneel and call him father, but Bai Ye's icy gaze stopped him. These people were shameless in public, but Bai Ye still had his pride. If they dared to utter another word, he was prepared to smash them to pieces on the spot. Following the first man in blue robes to the summit, 9 more wounded players climbed the mountain, while the remaining 90% of the players perished below. Because Bai Ye was present, the players on the scene behaved more restrainedly, remaining quietly atop Jade Emperor Peak. The surrounding tourists, watching these blood-soaked uninvited guests, and remembering the phone call they had just received, instinctively wanted to leave. But in the sky, several black dots were rapidly enlarging, followed by the sounds of winds and thunder. The 9 dragons pulling the coffin had arrived. 9 enormous dragon corpses, each 100 meters long, were seen dragging a bronze coffin down towards the summit of Mount Tai. The dragon corpses, pulling the coffin, shook the summit of Mount Tai, directly cracking the Jade Emperor Peak with massive fissures, causing countless rocks and timbers to tumble down the mountainside. Many tourists who had been lingering were affected, tumbling down the cliffs in a tragic manner. Ye Fan and his group stared in shock at the enormous dragon corpses. Dragons truly existed in this world. Finally here, the 10 players' eyes shone with excitement. Their earlier groveling and humiliation had not been in vain. But how do we get in? One player looked at the tightly sealed coffin, but immediately noticed a 5-colored altar emerging from the cracks below. This altar, is it for a sacrifice or something else? Another player pondered. A player glared fiercely at the tourists and said, "You, get inside the altar now." "Why should I?" A tourist tried to protest, but the next second, blood gushed out, splattering everywhere. Murder, murder, everyone was filled with fear. They had just doubted the identities of these people, but now they were certain they were the criminals from the foot of the mountain. And what was that just now? Internal energy? It had actually cleaved a person in two from a distance. With a sense of helplessness, the tourists entered the altar one by one like dumplings being dropped into boiling water. As he entered, Ye Fan subconsciously glanced at Bai Ye not far away. Bai Ye was still leisurely leaning back, completely unaffected by what had happened around him, simply shifting his posture and continuing to sit. Thinking of the way those people had stared at Bai Ye, and recalling Bai Ye's words asking him to sit beside him, all of this made Ye Fan grit his teeth and move closer to Bai Ye. HMPH. Still dare to run away? Seeing Ye Fan running in the opposite direction, a player sneered, wanting to make an example of him again. But upon seeing Bai Ye beside Ye Fan, the players shuddered in fear. "Godfather, are you going to punish this kid?" one player asked humbly. This stark contrast stunned the visitors on the 5-colored altar. Judging by their appearance and age, the speaker could easily be the grandfather of the young man. Who is whose godfather? Bai Ye, looking annoyed, stood up, stepped forward, and kicked the player hard, instantly exploding him into a spray of blood. "I've tolerated you for too long. Who are you calling godfather? Can't you even speak properly?" Chapter 314 Yinghero. At the summit of Mount Tai, atop Jade Emperor Peak, the 9 dragons pulling a coffin to the ground sparked countless disputes. At that moment, Bai Ye delivered a powerful kick, silencing the entire crowd. The once arrogant and terrifying murderer was reduced to dust as if made of tofu. On the distant mountainside, a pool of red and white carcass sent shivers down the spines of the tourists, who began to wonder what monster they had just chosen to take a picture with. Standing beside Bai Ye, Ye Fan relaxed his tense body, letting out a long breath. "Thank goodness I made the right bet." Seeing the exchange of glances between the players and the boy, Ye Fan understood Bai Ye's special nature. His only worry was whether Bai Ye would be willing to protect him. If Bai Ye hadn't casually offered him a seat, he wouldn't have taken the gamble. As Bai Ye kicked the player's body to pieces, the players present began to ponder, wondering where they had gone wrong. Everything had been fine before. Then, they remembered the player's words, their eyes filled with understanding. Standing beside Bai Ye, Ye Fan looked at the tourists in the 5-colored altar, wondering if he could save them. Just then, Bai Ye moved, walking towards the central 5-colored altar. The 20-meter-tall bronze coffin rested atop this altar, surrounded by dozens of smaller altars, like stars around the moon. Seeing Bai Ye's actions, Ye Fan dared not delay, fearing he would be skinned alive by the murderers if he strayed too far, and followed closely behind. The numerous tourists were forced onto the altar, numbering in the dozens. Seeing Bai Ye approach, they quickly made way for him, creating a 3 or 4 meter gap. The players, seeing Bai Ye move, suspected he had found a way to unlock the opportunity, and even risked being killed to follow. In an instant, the massive altar was crammed together with the forced tourists, Bai Ye, Yi Fan, and the players. The players, unwilling to get too close to Bai Ye, shouted at the surrounding tourists, "I'll spare your lives, now get off." The tourists, as if granted a pardon, tried to rush off the altar like refugees. But in an instant, a hazy, 5-colored light erupted around them, rendering everyone's legs as if bound to lead. They had no ability to leave. Amidst Bai Ye's calm, the players' excitement, and the tourists' terror, the ancient coffin revealed a large crack, and an eerie aura instantly engulfed everyone inside the 5-colored altar. Clang, as the coffin lid closed, the massive ancient coffin, along with the 9 dragon corpses, vanished completely, leaving only a scene of devastation on Jade Emperor Peak. Minutes later, countless cultivators arrived, regretting their actions as they looked at the vanished everything. Inside the bronze coffin, Bai Ye sat cross-legged in a corner, gazing at everyone present. Including myself, there are 72 people in total, more than double the original number. As Bai Ye pondered, his gaze pierced the darkness, surveying the surroundings. The ancient coffin was inscribed with ferocious beasts from the classic of mountains and seas. In the center sat a small bronze coffin, weathered by time, its contents a mystery. In the darkness, the players explored the interior in the dark, while the tourists huddled in fear, bewildered. Nothing was more terrifying than being trapped in a space with these murderous monsters. Yi Fan, having already noticed Bai Ye upon entering, immediately sat down beside him. After a moment's hesitation, he asked, "Young brother, immortal master, judging from your confident demeanor, do you know where we are and what will happen next?" Bai Ye glanced at the cautious Yi Fan and chuckled, "You can think of the altar as a teleportation point. We'll travel through a portal to another map, teleport to where?" Other tourists crowded around. After experiencing the surreal scene, they were now convinced of the supernatural. "Anyway, it's not on Earth, and there's no need to think about going back," Bai Ye replied, dispelling their illusions. "How could this be?" Yi Fan and the others lamented inwardly, subconsciously thinking of their families back home. Countless people waited in the darkness, and then Yi Fan unexpectedly saw Pangbo, who shouldn't have been climbing the mountain. In the chaos, he hadn't even noticed that his friend had also been taken hostage by players and taken to the 5-colored altar. Clang. Not long after, a violent tremor and a metallic clang rang out. The giant coffin overturned, its lid tilted, and a beam of light shone in from outside. "We've landed," a tourist exclaimed excitedly, and countless people rushed out. The players watched this scene coldly, seemingly wanting to use these people as guinea pigs. After all, they had clearly heard Bai Ye's words, a new area, who knew if there were any traps or poisonous fogs. At this moment, Bai Ye also stood up and walked out. Since they were here, they should naturally explore the area properly. Behind him, Yi Fan and several other more astute tourists followed closely, hoping for protection. Stepping out of the ancient coffin, they were met with a desolate, reddish-brown landscape devoid of any sign of life. "Damn it, if this really isn't Earth, what will we eat? We won't last long," one tourist lamented, worried about their future. "You'd better stay here," Bai Ye said, turning to Yi Fan and the others. Then, under their gazes as if he were an immortal, he lightly leaped onto a massive stone wall several meters high. Seeing Bai Ye suddenly leave, the tourists hurriedly cried out, "Immortal master, don't abandon us." After all, if Bai Ye really left, only that group of murderers would remain, and what they would do to them was another matter entirely. In an instant, countless tourists tried to climb the stone wall to follow Bai Ye. Wang Zuan and the others also wanted to follow, but Yi Fan immediately stopped them. "Yi Fan, what are you doing? Are you just going to let us wait here to die?" one student shouted in confusion. "Listen to little immortal master, it's best to stay here," Yi Fan said firmly. He recalled that Bai Ye had asked him to sit next to him not long ago, and in retrospect, it was indeed to save him. But some people still didn't believe it, and of the 30 students in the group, only Pangbo, Wang Zuan, and a dozen others remained. The rest all followed the tourists and went with Bai Ye, while the players had already stood on the stone wall. Through the dim light, Bai Ye could see the ruins in the distance. Inside the ruins, a dilapidated ancient temple emerged, causing all the players who saw it to tremble. Chapter 315 The Birth of the Crocodile Ancestor. We see a resource supply station, The 9 surviving players' eyes lit up as they gazed at the temple amidst the ruins in the distance. This was the kind of newbie perk the top 100 players should have. Without hesitation, they leaped down the stone wall and ran towards the temple. As players, seeing a resource point meant they had to thoroughly loot it. On the way, they used their unique abilities, each running faster than the last, their strides like shooting stars as they rushed towards the dilapidated ancient temple. This was also why Bai Ye hadn't advised Yifan and the others to come along. In terms of looting, how could Yifan and the others in their mortal form compare to these players? Killing, looting, burning, collecting everything was just the bare minimum. They wouldn't give ordinary people a chance to even get close. Even if the players didn't kill, there was still the crocodile ancestor to overcome later. Bai Ye stood atop the stone wall, and with a single step, he was already inside the temple, gazing at everything before him. The desolate ancient temple was silent, with a stone Buddha standing inside, and in front of it stood an ancient Bodhi tree that would take 6 or 7 people to encircle, exuding an ancient charm. Great Thunderclap Temple, a player followed closely behind, exclaiming in shock as he looked at the bronze plaque on the ancient temple. "Boss, I bet there's definitely treasure inside. Let me check it out for you first," a player said to Bai Ye. Before Bai Ye could even respond, 9 players filed in and rushed into the ancient temple, frantically loading it. Ancient lamps? Take them. Bronze plaque? Take them. Stone Buddha? Carry them away. Clang, boom boom boom, clatter clatter, crack crack crack. Under Bai Ye's amused gaze, the once quiet ancient temple had descended into chaos. Sounds like demolition came from inside the temple. Not only were items taken, but even the floor tiles inside the ancient temple were dug up layer by layer, broken into pieces, to check if anything was hidden inside. Then, a player holding a Vajra and a prayer mat came out, hesitated for a while before placing the Vajra in front of Bai Ye. "Boss, this is a tribute," the player said respectfully, with a hint of heartache in his voice. Subsequently, other players, having finished their looting, presented some of their treasures to Bai Ye. They knew that Bai Ye currently held a decisive advantage, and after all their hard work, the treasures would be his if he killed them. So, they wisely shared their possessions, making their gesture perfectly acceptable. It must be said that these players were impeccable in their social interactions. They acknowledged whoever was stronger, and would stop at nothing to survive. Perhaps describing them as despicable, shameless, and vile is something even they themselves would agree with. But this group also possessed the same drive to become the strongest. Like Yifan, they had the will, pride, talent, luck, and comprehension to become powerful. While these players might not have possessed the same talent, luck, or comprehension as Yifan, their dedication to becoming stronger was no less. Furthermore, compared to protagonists like Yifan, these guys had far lower moral standards. Others might have been discouraged and disappointed by their defeat in the struggle. But in the eyes of these players who had rebuilt their cultivation 10 times over and countless times started from scratch in the game, these were merely minor failures. Failure meant their level, equipment, or skills weren't up to par. They could just start over. There was no danger of their Deo heart collapsing. Even Bai Ye had to admit he wasn't as reckless as these people. After all, even if they die now, they would be safe in reality. Yet, they were willing to kowtow and kneel before Bai Ye, behaving in a disgraceful manner, all for an extra 3 years of cultivation time. Unfortunately, this world is unreasonable. If hard work alone could make one a powerful figure, the world would be full of self-proclaimed supreme beings. For someone like Bai Ye, reaching his current level required 0.000000001% effort, which is certainly valuable, but 99.9999999% talent is also crucial. "This ancient tree is destined for me," one player said, shaking his head as he looked at the Bodhi tree that would take 7 or 8 people to encircle. With hands like shovels, he frantically dug into the soil around the ancient Bodhi tree, then, with a gasp of surprise, unearthed a Bodhi seed the size of a walnut. Sensing the extraordinary nature of the Bodhi seed, the player became even more energetic, digging even more frantically. The other players, who had already looted most of the ancient temple, gathered around and joined in the digging. In just a few moments, the ancient temple was reduced to ruins. Even the stone pillars inside the main hall were dismantled and broken into pieces to see if any treasures were hidden inside. With a deafening roar, the ancient temple, destructively excavated by the group, collapsed, raising clouds of dust. Amidst the players' shifting gazes, as the ancient temple collapsed, the six-syllable mantra of Buddhism resounded, Om Mani Padme Hum. As the Buddhist chant echoed, the light barrier in the sky completely disappeared, and a terrifying sandstorm was about to sweep in. The faces of the players who had followed were deathly pale. They were too slow. The sandstorm kicked up as soon as they reached the ancient temple, forcing them to turn back empty-handed. Someone help me collect this stuff, Bai Ye said, pointing to a pile of broken offerings at his feet as the players prepared to return. Boss, I'll do it, one player said, sulking as he helped gather the items. There's too much stuff, you can't carry it all by yourself. I'll help you, another player chimed in. Whoosh, suddenly, just as the two players crouched down to loot, two thumb-sized black shadows leaped out of the shadows, attacking the back of their heads. Who the hell attacked me? The two players roared, grabbing the shadows without hesitation. They initially thought another player was trying to ambush them. But looking down, they saw a small, writhing monster, about the size of a thumb, resembling a snake or crocodile, covered in black scales. What is this thing? The other players also gathered around to observe. With their speed, they could easily return to the ancient coffin in a few steps. Looking at the living creature in his hands, the player crushed it with both hands, refining it instantly, and then shouted, "This thing is incredibly nourishing. It's at least equivalent to the life essence of 4 or 5 people." As he spoke, cracking sounds echoed all around. Looking around, they saw that in the short time they had lingered, hundreds of strange crocodiles had approached, and their numbers were rapidly increasing, exceeding 1,000 or even 10,000. But what greeted these strange crocodiles was the players' gazes, even more ferocious than the crocodiles themselves. How he? I told you the first 100 players would benefit. At least the life essence of 40 or 50,000 people. Wahahaha, eating these guys will give me 1 foot back into the ranks of Daoshi. Really, they've come at the perfect time. How dare they ambush me? You deserve to die. Rascal. As these players were filled with killing intent, Bai Ye's brows furrowed slightly, sensing a great terror locking onto him. It was the great sage-level crocodile ancestor, broken from its seal. Chapter 316 Airborne Furnace. The Path to Immortality for Humans. Near the 5-colored altar on the ancient star Yinghe, Ye Fan looked up at the almost vanishing barrier in the sky, his heart filled with worry. At this moment, a terrifying storm blotted out the sun and covered the 1,000-meter-long barrier centered on the 5-colored altar and the ancient temple ruins. If the barrier were to be lost, the storm would sweep everyone away in an instant. What do we do now? Wang Ziwan asked anxiously. Should we stay here to guard the altar, or follow the others and go after the immortal master? Maybe that child made us stay just to abandon us. They've already fled somewhere, Liu Yunzi said. At his words, Li Xiaoman, Lin Jia, and the others frowned, unsure how to proceed. Even Ye Fan, faced with a matter of life and death, wavered, but still gritted his teeth and persevered. Meanwhile, on the ancient temple ruins, the players were ecstatic. Tens of thousands of blood sacrifices, each one equivalent to the life force of 4 or 5 adults. They displayed their supernatural abilities, their bodies blurring as they rolled among the monstrous crocodiles. These monstrous crocodiles had no chance against the alt accounts of these kings and saints. These players inhaled massive amounts of vital energy with a single breath. Their physiques and energy, far from tiring from the constant devouring, actually grew faster. But the tourists who had followed were in a much worse situation. After the players confiscated their Buddhist artifacts, these people had no means of resistance, and the players had no intention of protecting them. After these tourists died, the players would conveniently absorb their vital energy. After all, players had no scruples, and even a small amount was valuable. Faced with a massive number of monstrous crocodiles, the tourists could only desperately flee, attempting to escape back to the 5-colored altar. As for Bai Ye, he had disappeared from the ancient temple at some point, returning to the stone wall to stare at the terrifying presence in the shadows. Hey, unheard of. Such a voracious appetite. From the invisible void, a wave of overwhelming evil energy emanated, resounding throughout Yinghe. The players who had just been devouring the monstrous crocodiles were now struck dumb, warily observing their surroundings. Ye Fan and the others, guiding the fleeing tourists back from their ordeal, also looked up, searching for the source of the voice. All the ordinary people were deathly pale. Today's experience had been truly surreal, and now they only hoped to survive. Before long, countless wisps of black mist surged forth from the ancient temple, enveloping the entire planet Yinghuo. Then, a gigantic hand shot into the sky, slamming down on the ancient star, causing it to tremble violently. Had this ancient star not been special, it would likely have been shattered by the single blow. Within the sky-covering black mist, the enormous, seemingly endless body rolled, then rapidly shrank, transforming into a tall, robust middle-aged man clad in black and gold armor. The man stared at the young man before him with blood-red, cold eyes, a sinister laugh escaping his lips. The unheard-of, abundant blood food he spoke of naturally referred to Bai Ye. In his eyes, the young man's strange strength was at most that of a dragon transformation cultivator. But the blood aura emanating from his entire body was even more concentrated than that of ordinary saints or saint kings. He was practically a born top-tier medicine, blood food, furnace, treasure, and celestial delicacy. Crocodile Ancestor approached Bai Ye step by step, his body shrouded in black mist, filled with a dense aura of death. "Boy, you've escaped with your life." Crocodile Ancestor looked at Bai Ye with an air of superiority. "Escaped with my life? You're not going to kill me?" Bai Ye asked, somewhat surprised. His clenched fist loosened slightly, wanting to see what this guy's last words were. After all, the guy in front of him was a great saint. Even after being sealed for 2,000 years and severely weakened, he could still destroy ancient star fields tens or hundreds of light years away, a guy who reached level 12 in the chat group's assessment. "You're quite calm," Crocodile Ancestor praised Bai Ye, who hadn't panicked after seeing him. "I, Crocodile Ancestor, am willing to take you as my disciple, do you agree?" Under his control, the strange crocodiles that had been constantly surging out stopped. Seeing the vibrant blood energy emanating from Bai Ye, the Crocodile Ancestor initially wanted to replenish his body, which had been depleted over 2,000 years of sealing. However, to avoid exhausting his resources, he forcibly suppressed the urge to devour him. Such power from merely transforming into a dragon. If raising this boy with such a special physique to the level of a king or saint would be more nourishing than swallowing a quasi-emperor alive, wouldn't it? He could see that the boy before him had reached the dragon transformation stage before he was even 20, a testament to his astonishing talent. With his full support, he could reap a 10,000-fold return in less than 1,000 years, a truly worthwhile deal. However, Bai Ye's reaction to the Crocodile Ancestor's invitation to become his disciple was far beyond his expectations. Bai Ye frowned and said, "That's all, boy, you're still not satisfied," Crocodile Ancestor said fiercely. "Kneel down and call me master, or your life will be in danger. With a physique like yours, without sufficient protection, you're just a powerful medicine in the eyes of the strong, no matter who it is. In their eyes you're just top-grade blood food in a dual cultivation furnace. Those in a hurry will skin you alive and dismember you, but many more will use methods of replenishing your essence to battle you day after day until they can't squeeze a drop of oil out of you. Now, become my disciple, and I'll teach you the supreme methods, so you can protect yourself." Crocodile Ancestor threatened and tempted, trying to make Bai Ye submit. Bai Ye only sneered, clenching his fists again. "I thought you'd say something profound, but it's just barking." As he spoke, under Crocodile Ancestor's wide eyes, soaring blood energy and power surged from Bai Ye's body. In just an instant, Bai Ye's strength reached the saint realm. But compared to the immense power of Bai Ye's blood energy in the eyes of the Crocodile Ancestor, this was nothing more than a drop in the ocean. That soaring, vigorous blood energy, seemingly immortal, its life force appearing to fill the entire universe. This surge of blood energy wasn't measured in units of saints, but rather on the foundation of emperors. Roughly equivalent to thousands, trillions of emperors stacked together. In the Crocodile Ancestor's eyes, this was more than just an elixir of immortality, it was the very symbol of immortality. It was practically a path to immortality come to life, with long legs running right in front of him. Eating a piece of Bai Ye's flesh would grant eternal life, refining a drop of his blood would grant lifespan equal to heaven and earth. Even a single lick would grant 100 years of life. Looking at Bai Ye, who possessed only saintly strength yet whose blood energy surged across the Gaia universe, the Crocodile Ancestor almost wept tears of joy. After being suppressed for over 2,000 years, heaven had finally shown him some mercy, arranging for an immortal elixir to run right before him. Overwhelmed with excitement and elation, Crocodile Ancestor retracted his earlier statement about accepting a disciple, and declared with overwhelming ferocity, "I'm determined to consume the immortal elixir, and even the great emperor can't stop me. I said it." Chapter 317 Warning, Cheating Alert. The immortal is in the Big Dipper. Within the vast universe, a terrifying surge of blood energy erupted, shaking the cosmos. All beings at the quasi-emperor level and above turned their gazes toward Mars, their eyes filled with shock. In the Northern Dipper, within countless forbidden zones, the supreme beings who had been lying dormant were all awakened by this terrifying blood energy. This aura, could it be that the path to immortality has opened ahead of schedule? No, this is definitely not the path to immortality. This blood energy is absolutely erupting from an immortal. There really is an immortal. There is truly hope for immortality. Countless powerful beings were filled with excitement and fear at this moment. This terrifying blood energy was countless times more astonishing than that of a fully fledged emperor. This immortal's strength could probably annihilate the entire heavens with a wave of their hand. It had never been seen before. What did they intend to do by suddenly appearing in this world? These terrifying beings could only sense the astonishing blood energy from the depths of the universe, but they did not feel any of the overwhelming pressure that a powerful being should have. They thought that the immortal was simply concealing their aura. But only the crocodile ancestor in Mars knew that the immortal, in the eyes of the other supreme beings, was only a saint. "I want to eat the elixir of immortality," the crocodile ancestor roared, transforming into its true form to devour Bai Ye. A terrifying giant crocodile, tens or even hundreds of kilometers long, appeared, its eyes like blood-red lanterns, each scaled tens or hundreds of meters long. Only it knew Bai Ye's true strength. If the battle wasn't resolved quickly, by the time the other supreme beings reacted, it wouldn't even be able to lick a hair of Bai Ye's head. It would have been devoured by those terrifying beings long ago. It could be said that if Bai Ye's existence was discovered at this moment, all the supreme beings would be restless. At that time, an unprecedented dark upheaval would occur in this universe. What about the death of supreme beings at the pinnacle of their cultivation? They could simply hold Bai Ye in their mouths, refining and beating him at the same time, extending their lives until the universe's annihilation. If Bai Ye's lifespan were evenly distributed among all life forms on an ancient star, each person would have at least 1,000 years of lifespan. Instantly, the crocodile ancestor opened its mouth, tens of kilometers wide, wanting to refine Bai Ye in an instant. But Bai Ye, who was already prepared, unleashed a fierce barrage of punches, dozens of punches simultaneously striking the crocodile ancestor's gaping maw. Each strike contained the full power of a saint, representing the law of pure destruction, capable of annihilating a shattered star in a single blow. But against the crocodile ancestor, a great saint capable of destroying star systems measured in light years, the saint's attacks were utterly ineffective. The repeated attacks could only briefly restrain the crocodile ancestor before it snapped its jaws shut, swallowing Bai Ye whole. "Refine him," the crocodile ancestor roared, determined to kill Bai Ye quickly and conceal this terrifying aura. And Bai Ye within its mouth. Name: Bai Ye. Lifespan: 19. Strength: 13 plus 0.4, 9, 513, 4. Constitution: 13 plus 0.4, 9, 513, 4. Spirit: 13 plus 0.4, 9, 513, 4. Charisma: 1.4 plus unused attribute points: 2.8. In an instant, within the crocodile ancestor's wide-open eyes, an aura of blood energy countless times more terrifying than before erupted from its mouth. The supreme beings in the forbidden zones were stunned, feeling the blood energy surge tens or even hundreds of billions of times stronger at the spot they had just been in. Could that immortal be breaking through? It's terrifyingly powerful, yet I didn't sense the slightest trace of tribulation lightning. The supreme beings were lost in thought, unable to comprehend it. Without witnessing it firsthand, it was beyond their comprehension. Not only them, but even the crocodile ancestor, who had personally swallowed Bai Ye, couldn't believe how the aura of that guy in his mouth had suddenly become so terrifying and sharp. Player warned for cheating. Please stop exploiting game loopholes. If you do not rectify the situation within 3 seconds, you will be kicked out of the game. Banned from the game for 1 day. A system warning message suddenly popped up in front of Bai Ye, making him pause in surprise. Why wasn't it suppressed this time, but instead kicked out of the game? What's wrong with this game? I cheated using my own skills. Why am I being kicked out? Bai Ye was furious. He was cheating anyway. Now the game is banning cheaters like this. From now on, anyone who cheats will be kicked out. It's outrageous. Filled with rage, Bai Ye's right hand, like a pure force of destruction, slammed upwards into the closed, black maw of the crocodile ancestor. Boom! A force as powerful as if splitting the heavens and earth exploded from the crocodile ancestor's mouth, distorting time and space with its single punch. With a single blow, the crocodile ancestor's massive body shattered into pieces, allowing Bai Ye to leap out. For Bai Ye now, 3 seconds was more than enough time to do anything. He wasn't worried about being too late. In the distance, the crocodile ancestor transformed back into human form, thin lines of blood appearing on his body, clearly indicating that his shattered remains were not yet fully healed. With an incredibly sinister gaze, the crocodile ancestor stared at Bai Ye, his face dark, and turned to flee. In an instant, the opponent's power had increased countless times. This was an unprecedented monster, and he no longer had the courage to face it. As he flew, the crocodile ancestor was filled with indignation, constantly cursing the heavens. He thought he had struck gold, but instead, he had crashed into a super-powerful vehicle. He was utterly damned by the Black Emperor. But Bai Ye wasn't about to let this guy leave so easily. He'd shown off and then tried to escape, his own strength increasing many times over because of this guy, a truly heinous crime. The next instant, watching the crocodile ancestor tear through space and disappear billions of miles away, Bai Ye raised his right fist high and unleashed a devastating punch across time and space. This punch transcended time and space, faster than light, shattering layers of space and reducing countless planets in its path to dust. The crocodile ancestor raced through the universe, sensing a terrifying aura behind him. Turning back, he was terrified. He saw that starfields within light years had vanished, transformed into pure, dark wastelands. The terrifying aura of death there was so intense that even a saint would instantly perish upon approaching. Damn it! You're pushing me to my death? Crocodile ancestor's eyes flashed with ferocity. Since that's the case, then no one will live. Before the aura of destruction arrived, crocodile ancestor roared madly at the entire world with all his might. The youth is an immortal. The immortal resides in the Big Dipper. Ho ha ho ha! With crocodile ancestor's roar, this message drifted through the universe, constantly flying, spreading in all directions. After leaving behind these words, crocodile ancestor's body instantly shattered into nothingness, leaving not even a trace. But this had already achieved his purpose, spreading the message and stirring up trouble. Since he couldn't survive, then let the world perish with him. In the end, whether Bai Ye died or those terrifying beings were killed, it would all be worth it. To this, Bai Ye sneered, "Dream on, I won't let you have your way." With a wave of his hand, he directly shattered all the messages that had been sent out, giving crocodile ancestor no chance. After doing all this, Bai Ye took a step forward, the laws beneath his feet activated, returning to Yinghurl, the surging power within his body gradually receding, returning to normal. Total time for power burst: 0.73 seconds, 3-dimensional attributes. 14.8. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318. Welcome to Beidao. The aura of the immortal has vanished. In the universe, as Bai Ye's aura receded, countless beings felt doubt. Because Bai Ye's outburst was only a fleeting moment, the supreme beings only hesitated for a moment before everything returned to calm. Could this be a sign before the opening of the immortal path? A supreme expert within the immortal realm leaked a trace of aura across the immortal path. Countless beings pondered, increasingly convinced that this was possible. Immortals truly existed. Although they didn't know why the aura leaked from the immortal path wasn't in the Big Dipper, the entire universe was only a few steps away for them, something they could reach in an instant, so it didn't matter where it was. Indeed, the prediction was correct. This life will open the immortal path. Countless supreme beings within the forbidden zones were filled with excitement, unable to contain themselves. Big Boss, you're back. On Mars, seeing Bai Ye's figure appear, the players hurriedly and respectfully returned the greeting, asking, "How is the entity that caused the black mist?" Bai Ye replied succinctly, "Sent away." That's good. All the players breathed a sigh of relief. The oppressive aura just now was something even a player at their peak couldn't withstand. It was the kind of power that could probably kill them all with a single glare. I wonder how the Big Boss managed to get rid of that guy, the player thought. He must have paid a heavy price, since the battle lasted less than a second. The players, with their current strength, couldn't sense what had happened. But in reality, a vast expanse of space within the entire solar system was shattered. and countless planets were swallowed by the fragmented space. All of this would be observed by Earth's Astronomical Bureau an hour later. Having dealt with the crocodile ancestor, the players on site were once again bursting with energy, chasing after the strange crocodiles on the ground and devouring them all. Bai Ye, meanwhile, concealed his aura and returned to the five-colored altar, pondering his earlier insights. Indeed, the rules of each world are different. Just now, I purely used force to exceed the speed of light in this universe, Bai Ye thought to himself. According to special relativity, any object with rest mass cannot exceed the speed of light. While the power Bai Ye just displayed was terrifying, it was far from surpassing the laws of physics. This could only be attributed to the different rules of this universe. Back in the Marvel universe, or physical universe similar to the three-body problem, the same power would only cause destruction at 99.99999% the speed of light, likely not even reaching the point of natural destruction. To exceed the speed of light, one would need infinite power. But in this world, the same power exhibits far greater destructive force, or rather, is more versatile. But is my blood energy really that noticeable? Bai Ye murmured to himself, recalling Crocodile Ancestor's words. In this world, even someone like Crocodile Ancestor could sense the surge of his blood energy. If he were to reach the Big Dipper, it would likely attract immense attention. The Holy Land might directly attack him with imperial weapons, forcing him to use his full strength. However, after his physique reached its peak, he would be kicked out of the game. Lost in thought, Bai Ye returned to the altar. The remaining 40-odd tourists all wore expressions of fear, terrified by the danger they had just witnessed. "Immortal Master, you're back," the tourists exclaimed excitedly upon seeing Bai Ye. Bai Ye nodded indifferently and walked towards the interior of the bronze coffin, the crowd naturally making way for him. "Ye Fan, why don't we go ask the Immortal Master what to do next?" an old classmate urged Ye Fan, wanting him to sound him out. "The Immortal Master has his reasons for not speaking, we just need to wait," Ye Fan said seriously. Seeing that Bai Ye didn't intend to pay them any attention, he refused to go and risk offending him. Being the first to stick your neck out comes at a price. The guy who called him Godfather was still stuck on Mount Tai. As time silently passed, the players returned from the dilapidated temple, their bodies brimming with vitality. Bai Ye, silently watching these people, felt a strange unease. Because these guys' vitality, or rather their lifespan, was several levels stronger than that of cultivators at the same stage of the heaven covering technique. After all, these guys didn't cultivate the heaven covering technique at all, they cultivated other systems that were weaker in combat but more comprehensive. Having played multiple games, these guys, while not necessarily mastering all the systems, could easily borrow from them and reach the peak of their power, living dozens of times longer than ordinary emperors. Bai Ye could already imagine the chaos those players who didn't travel to Earth but went directly to the Beidou world would cause. They were practically walking human medicine, and although their blood energy quality wasn't as high as others of the same level, in the eyes of the Beidou people, they were practically anime level. With this in mind, these players respectfully piled up the Buddhist treasures they held in front of Bai Ye, the tribute they had promised to bring for him. Looking at the pile of broken items in front of him, a tourist couldn't help but ask curiously, "Great Immortal, are these immortal artifacts?" "Of course, have you heard of the Great Thunderclap Temple?" "These were taken from there," the player said proudly. Although they were respectful to Bai Ye, they still had to show off in front of these ordinary people. After all, the weak show off to the even weaker. The group continued to recuperate inside the ancient coffin. To the astonishment of the players, Bai Ye poured all his cultivation and blood energy into the altar, maxing out the progress bar. Soon, the 9 dragons pulling the coffin started again, and the enormous dragon corpse began to fly towards the Stargate. Bai Ye, having dispersed his true energy, quietly returned to his corner. Although his power had returned to normal, the other players still dared not act recklessly. After all, they had personally witnessed Bai Ye's previous cultivation. It was just a matter of taking one step. Dispersing his cultivation power for a second was no different from not dispersing it at all. But these players had misunderstood. Bai Ye didn't even need to take one step to resume his cultivation. Because when all his attributes increased to 14.8, Bai Ye's innate talent had increased by an immeasurable amount, making him unmatched in the world. The reason he dispersed his inner energy was both to recharge the 9 dragons pulling the coffin and to prepare for resuming his cultivation of the heaven covering technique. He was very interested in the Taoist scripture that was the most powerful in the Sea of Wheels realm, so he decided to disperse his power in advance to prepare. In the quiet wait, with a resounding boom, the bronze coffin landed once more, finally arriving at a major battleground for cultivation. For a long time to come, this place would be the center of the entire universe, the focus of attention for countless high-level cultivators. "We've arrived," Bai Ye stood up gently, smiling at everyone's gaze. "Welcome to the Big Dipper, the desolate ancient forbidden land." As he spoke, the surrounding players felt their internal energy stagnate, their brows furrowing. Chapter 319. He's become a cute boy. How could this be? My battle aura is unusable. What kind of hellhole is this? A player exclaimed inwardly, looking around in shock. Seeing the same ghostly expressions on the faces of the other players, he immediately realized he wasn't the only one experiencing this. Bai Ye gently stroked his long, dark hair, feeling the heavy pull of his waist-length hair now that he was immortal again. The realistic physics engine had successfully taught Bai Ye a lesson. The ancient forbidden land. Is this some kind of extremely dangerous place? Why is it called a forbidden land? Someone asked. Of course. For you, staying here will cause your life to slip away rapidly. The moment you leave the forbidden land, you'll be decades older, or even dead, Bai Ye explained simply and calmly. Upon hearing this, all the tourists' expressions changed drastically. Losing decades of lifespan, how long would they have left to live? Only the players remained calm, not giving it much thought. With their abilities, they could recover their lost lifespan in no time. By the way, the longer you stay, the older you'll get, so you'd better leave quickly, Bai Ye said with a slight smile. Then where should we go? Let's get out of here quickly, a tourist said hastily. Some players, relying on their excellent physical fitness and execution, climbed up an ancient tree. Looking into the distance, they could vaguely see signs of human habitation. Boss, following this road is the shortest shortcut, then let's hurry up, a tourist urged, but the players ignored him and looked to Bai Ye for the decision. You guys go first, Bai Ye said, looking at Yi Fan. You stay here and do some things with me. Yi Fan pointed at himself, momentarily at a loss, feeling as if he had been pierced by knives. The other players all looked at Yi Fan coldly, wanting to see what this kid was capable of. Yes, you stay, Bai Ye said calmly. If Yi Fan doesn't leave, I'll stay with him too. Pangbo stepped forward, making the university group members sweat for him. This young man was no pushover. Don't be foolish, seeing Pangbo want to stay, Yi Fan panicked. The more loyal his brother was, the less he could let him get involved, so he quickly said to Bai Ye, I'm willing to stay, let the others go. Does this guy think I'm kidnapping him? A black line appeared on Bai Ye's forehead. There's a big benefit coming. If you want him to leave, I don't care. A big benefit. Yi Fan's eyes widened, his mind racing, but he immediately shook his head and changed his mind, saying, then no need. Bai Ye nodded slightly, pointing to the tattered items dragged out by the players. Give me the relic, and take all these things if you want, big boss. We also want to stay. A player smiled and approached, but was driven back by Bai Ye's cold gaze. Not long after, when most of the people around had left, Bai Ye tossed a relic he had exchanged with the players to Yi Fan, who hurriedly caught it. Immortal Master, what is this? Yi Fan asked, holding the relic. Just payment for helping, Bai Ye said casually. Without this guy, he could have searched for years without finding the elixir of immortality left behind by the ruthless man. Help, Yi Fan understood immediately. Bai Ye had specifically asked him to stay, so he must be of some use. What does Immortal Master want me to do? It's simple, just wander around, Bai Ye said. Wander? Yi Fan and Pangbo were both stunned, not understanding the purpose of this. Yes, go wherever you want, I'll follow you, Bai Ye nodded gently. Yi Fan, who had never heard of such a request, was confused, but the ease of the task eased his anxiety slightly. After that, Bai Ye followed Yi Fan, aimlessly wandering through the desolate forbidden land. It seemed like a leisurely stroll, but every minute was equivalent to sacrificing 7 or 8 days of their lives. Knowing this, Yi Fan and Pangbo walked with trepidation, fearing they might turn into skeletons and die on the road. For the first time, the two felt an immense pressure, realizing how time had been wasted. Along the way, they even saw the ancient forbidden stone tablet, confirming Bai Ye's words. Soon, a minute passed, 10 minutes passed, an hour passed. Just when Ye Fan thought he was going to die here, Bai Ye's calm voice rang out, "Found it, finally found it." The huge weight lifted from their hearts. Looking around, they saw several thick vines surrounding an open space, inside which was a square spring, and on each of the 13 low trees around it hung a bright red fruit. "Immortal Master, is this the elixir of immortality you spoke of?" Ye Fan asked, having inquired about what they were looking for along the way. Bai Ye, whose physique had returned to mortal, nodded slightly, walked forward, picked 3 fruits, and swallowed them directly. Feeling the sweet juice flowing in his mouth, Bai Ye's eyes narrowed comfortably, and his resolve to find a chef whose cooking was comparable to his ability to administer poison grew stronger. Watching Bai Ye lazily enjoy the fruit like a cat, the two subconsciously swallowed. They had barely eaten anything since climbing the mountain and were starving. After swallowing the 3 fruits, they walked to the sacred spring, drank 4 or 5 mouthfuls of water, and then Bai Ye stood up, saying, "The rest are yours. Eat as much as you want." With Bai Ye's permission, the group quickly went over and stuffed the fruit and spring water into their mouths. Although they were eating what Bai Ye had left over, they didn't mind at all. This was an elixir of immortality, something that could extend their lives by many years. They would even take leftovers. Soon, after a hearty meal, the two put away the remaining 2 fruits and began walking out of the forbidden area. Perhaps because of the elixir of immortality, they seemed to have inexhaustible strength. They caught up with those who had gone ahead in just half a day. "Boss, you're back," the player exclaimed in surprise. "Is everything done?" Bai Ye nodded slightly, offering no comment. Ye Fan and the others also kept their thoughts to themselves, not speaking to anyone. After another hour's journey, after climbing a low mountain, the tourists, panting heavily and almost unable to continue, felt their bodies heat up, then their skin turned a deep crimson, like blood. Immediately, they remembered what Bai Ye had said earlier. They had left the forbidden ancient land, and the terrifying nature of this forbidden land was beginning to unfold before them. Intense pain erupted from every bone marrow, wisps of blood seeping from their skin, and continuous screams erupted from the tourists' mouths. Only Bai Ye and a few other players remained expressionless, showing a normal tolerance for this pain. 2 hours later, Bai Ye looked at his body, shrunk to that of a 14-year-old. A hint of dissatisfaction appearing on his youthful, handsome face. "Did we leave here too early?" Chapter 320. Knowing there are tigers in the mountains, I won't go to the mountains I know are dangerous. Outside the desolate forbidden land, a large group of slightly aged middle-aged people lay unconscious on a low hill. Among them were 2 children who looked only 7 or 8 years old, their brows furrowed as they mingled in the crowd. A seemingly energetic boy looked down at his hands, his brows furrowed, a hint of dissatisfaction in his expression. This was because it was slightly different from what he had expected. He had thought that consuming 3 elixirs of immortality would just offset the deviation in his lifespan. Unexpectedly, after his guidance, the group's greatly increased speed led to a reduction in the lost lifespan, causing his body to age 3 or 4 years in reverse. However, Bai Ye gently stroked his increasingly childish cheeks. "Why hasn't my face returned to normal? After all, according to the panel's abilities, once proven, it's permanent. Once reached, it won't fade. Once improved, it won't collapse." In other words, if the possibility of the panel malfunctioning is ruled out, there's only one truth. I didn't expect that in the panel's eyes. I'm even more charming in this state than before, so it's considered an error that doesn't need correction in the panel's judgment. Bai Ye felt speechless. What kind of panel is this? This childish aesthetic? It actually thinks I'm more erotic now. Gently stretching his body, feeling the supple physique transformed by the elixir of immortality, capable of tearing apart tigers and leopards, Bai Ye's mood was somewhat complicated. Good news, light and supple, easy to push over. Bad news, I'm the one being pushed over. Although he couldn't see his own face, Bai Ye guessed that he should be very moist and easy to bend over. The few reincarnators beside him weren't surprised to see Ye Fan, Pangbo, and Bai Ye's appearances, thinking that this must be the opportunity they had just been looking for. Not long after, Ye Fan and the others were the first to wake up. Since they knew the effects of the elixir of immortality beforehand, they weren't particularly surprised, only curious about their renewed youth. "Why haven't you aged?" a strong voice rang out. The middle-aged tourists who then woke up stared wide-eyed at Ye Fan and Pangbo. "This is the power of a celestial master, are you not convinced?" Pangbo questioned, silencing the others. Amidst the argument, the players approached Bai Ye to inquire about his next move. Continue across a few more mountains, and someone will come to guide you into the grotto heavens, teaching you the laws of this world, Bai Ye said indifferently, like a little adult. Then it's up to you to choose, boss. What's the difference? A player asked. The tourists might be surprised by Bai Ye's knowledge of the inner workings, but for the players who had witnessed countless systems, Bai Ye's omniscience suggested he possessed divination abilities, so naturally they asked more questions. Those grotto heaven masters are far weaker than you were at your peak, so your next move depends on your own fate. Whether you stay or leave is irrelevant. Bai Ye glanced at the group, saying nothing more, but the meaning was clear. Boss, I understand. The player immediately understood. In the blink of an eye, most of the players had left, heading off to other places. Since the Lord of the Cave Heaven was far weaker than they were at their peak, he probably couldn't teach them much. Those who left planned to hide away and cultivate for a few years, raising their strength to 70% of their peak before making further plans. Those who remained planned to proceed step by step, cultivating and refining within the Cave Heaven simultaneously. Half an hour later, with a flash of rainbow light, a young woman of 18 or 19, with a slender figure, jade-like face, and an ethereal beauty, landed before them. This was none other than Wei Wei, the guide from the beginner's village in countless novels. After listening to the accounts of those present, and learning that these people had emerged from the ancient Forbidden Land, she was overjoyed. Especially knowing that 3 of them had consumed the precious medicine, she was even more delighted and prepared to lead the group directly to a nearby town. However, just before setting off, Bai Ye spoke first. Don't go yet, I don't think it's appropriate. Oh, Wei Wei glanced at Bai Ye. She had a strong impression of him before. After all, he was one of only 3 who had consumed the precious medicine, and he was also so cute. Young man, do you have any objections? Wei Wei asked with a smile, looking at Bai Ye. Judging from your eagerness just now, you probably want to recruit us into your sect as disciples, right? Bai Ye sized up the girl before him and said, in that case, I recommend that you don't let this slip before returning to your sect. The girl immediately understood Bai Ye's meaning. You mean there's a traitor within our sect? That possibility can't be denied, can it? Bai Ye said, for safety, it would be best to send us directly back to the sect that way. As the sole participant, your contribution will definitely be substantial, young man. Theoretically speaking, if it attracts competition from various grotto heavens, you should gain the most benefits, right? Why are you reminding me? Wei Wei asked with a smile. But the risks are also great, Bai Ye stated. If you lose and become enraged, ordinary people won't survive. What kind of ordinary person are you? The tourists and players nearby all thought to themselves, but dared not say it aloud. In truth, Bai Ye's real goal was only the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven. After all, among the several grotto heavens to be contested, only the Spirit Ruins possessed the initial chapter of the Dao scripture. If he did nothing and let the plot unfold as it was in the original story, he might not be assigned to the Spirit Ruins. Since that was the case, knowing there were dangers, why not simply avoid them? A direct warning would prevent anything from happening. Since the plot was against him, why foolishly follow the original path? He wasn't out of his mind. Faced with Bai Ye's suggestion, Wei Wei, after some thought, also found it reasonable. Looking at the 40 individuals with above-average talent before her, including 3 with the potential to become immortals, she realized that bringing them back to the grotto heaven alone would not only be a matter of secrecy, but also a significant achievement. After a moment's thought, the girl smiled at the seemingly mature Bai Ye and said, young man, I accept your suggestion. Let's change our destination and return directly to the sect. As she spoke, a rainbow of light descended, enveloping everyone and leading them towards the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven. Along the way, tourists and players constantly asked the girl about everything in this world, supplementing their own worldviews. When faced with the girl's questions, the players were the ones who answered, remaining silent about everything that had happened before. No one dared to reveal the extraordinary nature of Bai Ye and the players. After Bai Ye's few words, the resources that had been divided among the various grotto heavens all rushed towards the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven. Even with the rainbow light's swift travel, it still took most of the day to reach the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven. Upon landing, following Wei Wei's report, the elders of the Grotto Heaven immediately arrived. Chapter 321 The Strange Sea of Bitterness. Great news. Wei Wei, you did a great job. You did a great job. Inside the Spirit Ruins Cave Heaven, a large group of people emerged from the ancient Forbidden Land. The elders within the cave heavens couldn't sit still, their faces filled with surprise as they rushed over. So young, when the elders arrived, they were shocked to see Bai Ye and the other two. The next moment, they immediately understood that the three must have eaten the sacred fruit from the ancient Forbidden Land, and they were overjoyed. As they spoke, an elder stepped forward and said kindly, "Young friends, I am Li Qingqi, an elder of this cave heaven. Would you like to become my disciples?" "Old Li, you're being unfair, trying to take on so many disciples all by yourself." "Elder Li, there's no need to be impatient," another elder said calmly. "Let's first test these disciples' aptitude and see how they are." "All right," Elder Li nodded in agreement. The group spoke with an air of arrogance, the superiority of cultivators over ordinary people, assuming these individuals were disciples of their own grotto heaven without consulting those present. Having reached their conclusions, the group smiled and first looked at the three who had rejuvenated after consuming the sacred fruit and spring water, saying, "Young friends, we will now examine your aptitudes." "Very well." Bai Ye proactively raised his right hand, saying, "Hurry up and finish the examination, then teach me the cultivation method." The elders were not annoyed by Bai Ye's attitude, gently grasping his wrist to sense his aptitude. As the elders' divine senses probed into Bai Ye's body, a moment of silence fell over the entire assembly. Within Bai Ye's body, the life wheel shone brilliantly, radiating countless rays of light, like the first ray of light that pierced the heavens and earth. Within the boundless sea of bitterness, however, it was as smooth and soft as tofu. The sea of bitterness, touched by the elders' divine senses, even trembled slightly, as if a mark could be left with the slightest force. The elders who had been investigating exchanged glances, utterly bewildered. This peculiar physique was unheard of, not even recorded in ancient texts. "Why are you elders so hesitant?" Wei, seeing this, asked curiously, stepping forward to probe with her divine sense, but also falling silent. "This sea of bitterness is too soft," Wei thought strangely. The first stage of cultivation is to open up the sea of bitterness, carving out a spring to release the divine power source of the wheel of life. In other words, according to common sense, the better the talent, the faster the cultivation speed, and the faster the sea of bitterness is opened. But for someone like Bai Ye, whose sea of bitterness was as soft as bean curd dregs, it could be easily carved through with a little force, which was simply outrageous. "How is it?" Bai Ye asked. Don't be impatient. Your talent is unprecedented, but it's definitely not bad." Wei spoke somewhat hesitantly, and could only leave it to further observation. "Oh, whatever. When can I start cultivating?" Bai Ye said indifferently. He didn't believe his 14.8 physique, which granted him exceptional talent, could be lacking. Advancing to the great emperor realm was effortless for him. After temporarily designating Bai Ye as a potential immortal, the elders examined the aptitudes of others. Ye Fan and Pangbo, among others, received the same treatment as in the original story. However, when the players were tested, the unprecedented success rate sent everyone into a frenzy. These players, who were once at the peak king-level saints, capable of destroying the spirit ruins cave heaven with a single breath, displayed talent far beyond what a mere potential immortal seedling could achieve. While most were slightly inferior to those with divine bodies, they each possessed unique abilities, suggesting limitless potential. For a time, even Bai Ye, Ye Fan, and Pangbo were overshadowed. The elders surrounded the players, constantly expressing their amazement. As a subordinate force of the Yaoguang Holy Land, they planned to immediately send these individuals to Yaoguang in exchange for favor and resources from higher levels. After spending some time testing everyone's aptitude, they were arranged to stay overnight at the Spirit Ruins Cave Heaven, where they would receive the collective teachings the next day. The entire Spirit Ruins Cave Heaven was shrouded in a vast sea of white clouds, with pavilions and towers appearing and disappearing in the mist. It was a major sect within the Yan Kingdom. Bai Ye sat cross-legged on the bed, tilting his head to look at the ceiling. After speaking in his mind for a while, a knocking sound came from the door. "Who is it?" "Come in," Bai Ye said calmly. With a creak, Ye Fan, who looked about 8 or 9 years old, walked into Bai Ye's surprise. "What are you doing here?" Bai Ye asked curiously. It was the middle of the night, and it wasn't a beautiful woman who came. What did she want with him? "Immortal Master, I want to confirm with you whether the sacred body truly cannot cultivate," Ye Fan asked, stepping forward. Even he felt a slight pressure from everything that had happened during the day. Everyone else could do it, but he couldn't. That was too much. This made him subconsciously think of Bai Ye. In the eyes of these tourists, Bai Ye was practically a prophet, knowing everything and speaking with absolute certainty. Almost nothing he said was wrong. Sure, it just costs money. Bai Ye lay on the bed, his feet leaning against the wall. You can think of it as being invincible among your peers, but requiring dozens or even hundreds of times more resources than other players. You need to spend a fortune. Can I cultivate? Hope flashed in Ye Fan's eyes. Today, his old classmates had been pessimistic, mocking, and dismissive, but only Bai Ye had told him it was possible. Of course you can. It's difficult for others, but you just need to work hard. Bai Ye pulled the sheet tighter around himself and dismissed him. I understand. Thank you for your guidance, immortal master. Ye Fan nodded earnestly and walked towards the window. Even with his resolute will, Bai Ye's words still gave him even stronger motivation. By the way, don't come looking for me in the middle of the night next time. I'm not Bodhi Patriarch, Bai Ye called out. As the room emptied again, Bai Ye brought up the game menu and gently pressed the exit option. In an instant, Bai Ye's figure disappeared from the room and reappeared in the real world. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, back in the real world, Bai Ye appeared, a game cartridge in his hand, silently counting. When he reached the 30th second, he quickly inserted the cartridge and re-entered the world. But for him, only 30 seconds had passed. At a time flow rate of 1001. 8 hours had already passed in the world of covering the sky. Too lazy to wait another night, Bai Ye skipped this cutscene. Looking at the sunlight streaming in, Bai Ye pushed open the door and went outside. Everyone outside was already awake, full of energy and anticipation for today's cultivation instruction. Elder Wu Qingfeng, who specialized in instructing disciples within their first 3 years of entry into the sect, arrived shortly afterward and began preparing to impart the teachings. Chapter 322 The Multidimensional Sea of Suffering. Double the power of suffering. Inside the thatched hut, Bai Ye gently closed the door. It was noon, and earlier that morning, he had joined the newcomers in listening to Elder Wu Qingfeng's lecture. He had successfully memorized the Taoist scripture during the class and planned to practice it upon his return. With the door closed, Bai Ye sat cross-legged on the bed, recalling Wu Qingfeng's words. The Taoist scripture, considered the most suitable introductory technique for beginners in the world of covering the sky, was naturally not simple. The 5 major realms of the human body, the Sea of Wheels, the Dao Palace, the 4 extremes, the Dragon Transformation, and the Immortal Platform, were the necessary hurdles to overcome in cultivation. Even the Lingsu Cave Heaven only had an introductory chapter, and a fragment of it, less than 10% of the original, only allowing cultivators to communicate with the Sea of Bitterness, and even then, the content differed from the original. But it was perfect for Bai Ye. Recalling the specific text, Bai Ye began his cultivation. Reaching the Sea of Wheels realm required opening the Sea of Bitterness, drawing forth the spring of life, building a divine bridge, and reaching the other shore. The first step was sensing the wheel of life. Meanwhile, the life wheel within Bai Ye's body constantly radiated light. That light even pierced through the unopened Sea of Bitterness, manifesting itself like light pollution. Bai Ye could sense it simply by calming his mind. Then, open the Sea of Bitterness. Following Professor Wu Qingfeng's steps, Bai Ye circulated the Taoist scripture to challenge the Sea of Bitterness. But no special method was needed. Bai Ye's body, soft and bouncy like jelly, would tremble simply from the probing of his divine sense. If others opened their Sea of Bitterness by squeezing juice from tree bark and vegetation, Bai Ye was like solidified oil, automatically melting upon increased temperature. Silently reciting the Taoist scripture's methods, Bai Ye gently swept across countless seas of bitterness, which were instantly dissolved. A blinding scarlet pierced from Bai Ye's Sea of Bitterness, as if you were in a raging sea of blood, creating a terrifying atmosphere of a slaughterhouse, as if one could smell the overwhelming, sweet, and pungent stench of blood. This phenomenon, it feels like a malevolent star, Bai Ye pondered as he cultivated. Others' bitter sea phenomena were either radiant with golden light or dazzling with rosy hues. But when it came to him, it was a blood-red aura, filled with a murderous aura, making him look anything but benevolent. In a moment of contemplation, a divine spring gushed forth from Bai Ye's bitter sea. In just a few moments, he had pierced through his bitter sea, reaching the wheel of life, opening the eye of life spring, and divine liquid resembling fresh blood oozed from his body. Bai Ye, the bitter sea is complete, compared to ordinary people who need elixirs like the 100 herbs elixir to aid their foundation establishment, Frantically building their foundation, Bai Ye felt a strange sense of unease. With such rapid cultivation, will my foundation be weak? Will I become a stepping stone for others to defeat opponents of higher levels? Thinking of Yifan's later divine restriction, fighting opponents of the same level with ease, Bai Ye suddenly felt uncertain. Losing would be too humiliating. Or, should I start over, cultivate the bitter sea again, and solidify my foundation? Bai Ye gently stroked his chin, lost in thought. Meanwhile, outside Lingsu Cave Heaven, a group of uninvited guests arrived together. Dozens of rainbow lights flashed across the sky and landed simultaneously before the entrance to Lingsu Cave Heaven. Each of them possessed an air of otherworldly elegance, their long robes flowing. Upon seeing the newcomers, the gatekeeper's expression changed. He had a very deep impression of several of these people. He had seen them once before during an exchange between different cave heavens many years ago. They were either elders or sect leaders from other cave heavens. Why were they all here now? What do they want? Quickly report to the sect, I'll come to greet them, the older senior disciple among the gatekeepers ordered. He stepped forward nervously, clasping his hands in a fist salute, and said, Greetings to the leaders and elders of the various grotto heavens. Our sects haven't informed us of your arrival, so I humbly ask what brings you here. We have indeed come to Lingsu Grotto Heavens on short notice. An elder stroked his white beard, speaking with a gentle smile. We only heard that yesterday, Lingsu Grotto Heavens took in a group of prodigies who emerged from the desolate ancient forbidden land. The disciple's expression changed slightly. He had seen senior sister Wei Wei bring that group yesterday. He hadn't expected that the matter would leak out in just one day. Were these people trying to force him to resign? Not long after, the elders who had received the news arrived in rainbow form, their faces ashen as they stared at the elders and leaders of the other grotto heavens. Yesterday, when Wei Wei said she was worried about a traitor within the sect and sent them back directly, they thought she was being overly cautious. But only 2 days later, they were being pressured by the various sects. Fellow Daoists, what brings you here? Why don't we go inside and discuss this? The Lingsu Cave Heavens leader said politely. Leader Li, you know our purpose this time, so there's no need for formalities, the Jingsha Cave Heavens leader said. Yes, Leader Li. We can't let your Lingsu Cave Heaven have all the credit with those disciples, otherwise we won't even be able to sleep peacefully anymore, another Cave Heaven leader said with a shake of his head and a laugh. Faced with the combined strength of the 5 major Cave Heavens high-level warriors, even the Lingsu Cave Heavens leader felt insecure and could only helplessly say, since that's the case, what do you all want? Let's draw up a deal. It's simple, how about we split yesterday's group equally? Why don't you just rob them? Our Cave Heaven found them. The Lingsu Cave Heavens leader roared angrily. Not only him, but the other elders present were also filled with indignation. Leader Li, don't be impatient, we can sit down and talk things over, an elder said, trying to smooth things over. The Lingsu sect leader took a deep breath, suppressing his anger, his mind racing. Want people? No problem, but we need to pick a few first. Inside the thatched hut, Bai Ye sat cross-legged on the bed, feeling his bitter sea, now fully restored. It really works. Through self-limitation, I can store the concept of my cultivated realm within it. That means I can try to rebuild it now. As Bai Ye spoke, he sat down to rebuild his realm again. In an instant, his bitter sea was reopened, and the life spring gushed forth. Then, Bai Ye calmed himself, taking out the realm sealed by self-limitation and superimposing it with the newly opened bitter sea. Within the 4-dimensional space, Bai Ye's bitter sea exhibited the same superimposed state. Double the power of bitterness, feeling the superimposed power within him, Bai Ye smiled slightly, storing his bitter sea realm once more, beginning his third rebuild. This time, however, Bai Ye did not follow the previous method. Instead, he began to drastically revise the contents of the incomplete Taoist scripture, the Sea of Bitterness, making changes according to his own better understanding. Within the self-limited space, the spiritual power stored within Bai Ye took effect, transmitting a completely new scripture on the opening of the Sea of Bitterness into Bai Ye's mind several tens of seconds later. Chapter 323 Even the great emperor wouldn't dare to be so arrogant with me. Inside the main hall, the distribution issue had been completely settled. 10 people would remain in Lingsu Cave Heaven, and the rest would be divided equally among the various cave heavens. For the head of Lingsu Cave Heaven, this was merely a temporary measure. He had already sent a letter to Yaoguang Holy Land yesterday, informing them of everything. The disciples who entered yesterday were all exceptionally talented, truly top-tier seedlings for the immortal platform. With proper training, they could potentially become great powers in their lifetime. If the Yaoguang heavenly soldiers arrived and discovered that these cave heavens had taken what they wanted, it was likely that soon only his cave heaven would remain as the sole ruler of the entire Yan kingdom. Thinking of this, Headmaster Li raised his hand and summoned a cultivator at the Life Spring realm, who then transformed into a rainbow and flew away, summoning the disciples to be temporarily housed within these cave heavens. Is this still the Sea of Bitterness? Inside the thatched hut, Bai Ye sat cross-legged on the bed, looking at everything within his Sea of Bitterness. Within the surging blood energy of the Sea of Bitterness, different properties were manifested under a multidimensional superposition. Some seas of bitterness resembled frozen red ice crystals, others were boiling seas of blood, and still others teemed with life force like flames. In just a few moments, the fragmentary scroll of the Taoist scripture on the Sea of Bitterness had already been modified into dozens of versions for him, each unique and wondrous. The things he cultivated became increasingly absurd, none of them behaving normally. The only commonality was that every Sea of Bitterness was scarlet, filled with eeriness and misfortune. 36 times the power of bitterness, Bai Ye clenched his fist. The game didn't suppress these things cultivated in this world, meaning he could keep building them up. Let's cultivate to 99 times first to make it a round number. Bai Ye calmed himself and continued cultivating, feeling that he was going further and further astray on the path of cultivation. Was this still the heaven-covering technique? At this moment, a knock came from outside the door, pulling Bai Ye's consciousness back. Gently pulling open the door, Bai Ye saw a disciple at the Life Spring realm coldly say, "Junior brother, the sect leader and elders asked me to inform you to come with me to the main hall immediately." Peeking in, Bai Ye saw several disciples, including Yi Fan, already waiting at the door. Clearly, it wasn't just him, others were also preparing to go. "What's the matter at the main hall?" Bai Ye asked. "You'll find out when you get there," the Life Spring realm disciple said coldly. He didn't know the reason and didn't want to waste time explaining. But what awaited him was Bai Ye's even colder attitude. With a bang, the wooden door slammed shut by Bai Ye. Bai Ye's calm voice came from inside. "Since that's the case, inform me after you've figured it out. I need to cultivate now." "Leave, you?" Looking at the closed door, the disciple was furious. Even someone who hadn't yet entered the cultivation world dared to give him such attitude. Yi Fan and the others were also astonished and surprised. Even knowing Bai Ye was no ordinary person, they were still shocked by his attitude. This was a celestial sect. "Boy, don't push your luck." The disciple's tone was incredibly sinister. "Even if you're a celestial seedling, you'd better behave yourself right now, or I'll have to break down the gate and drag you out." Creak with the disciple's words, the gate opened again, revealing Bai Ye's handsome face. "HMPH, you brat," the disciple sneered, thinking Bai Ye had given in. But the next moment, a fist suddenly loomed large in front of him. Bang! The disciple felt a burning pain on his nose, followed by several teeth flying out of his mouth. His entire cheek caved in as if struck by a heavy hammer, leaving a deep fist mark. "What are you? You think you deserve my respect? Even the great emperor wouldn't dare speak to me like that," Bai Ye said coldly. Since this world was a game, he would treat it like a game and play by the rules. But playing the game didn't mean he had to suffer. This was just a mere NPC, yet it dared to oppose him, a player. Even with his main account restricted, he was still not someone these guys could offend. If pushed too far, he would tear the entire universe apart. Before them, the Life Spring disciple's vitality was incredibly tenacious. Even with his skull caved in, he hadn't died. He clutched his sunken cheek, struggling to stand, but was kicked away by Bai Ye. The terrifying force, like that of a dragon and elephant, sent the disciple flying over 100 meters, then tumbling down the steps and down the cliff, his fate unknown. Bang! The door slammed shut again, leaving Yi Fan and the others outside, looking at each other, unsure what to do. "What should we do next?" Wang Ziyuan asked worriedly. "Should we stay here?" "Let's stay. If that disciple doesn't return for a long time, someone else will definitely come," Li Xiaoman said. Pagbo remarked, "But the immortal master's temper is truly fierce." Fierce? Perhaps he sees human life as worthless, the others thought to themselves. One wrong word and he's dead. How will they survive in the sect now? Just as Li Xiaoman had said, a quarter of an hour passed, and the many elders and sect leaders waiting in the main hall began to grow impatient. Some even suspected that someone in other grotto heavens had secretly taken those guys away. Biking, go see what's going on. Why haven't you returned yet? An elder ordered. The disciple named Biking obeyed and transformed into a flying rainbow. A few minutes later, Biking arrived at the low mountain and looked at his junior brother lying lifeless on the steps. His expression changed slightly. He hadn't expected to suffer such a cruel fate within the sect. He looked grimly at the people waiting on the mountain and said, "Who did this?" The people stammered, but finally one of them stepped forward and answered, reporting to senior brother, "This senior brother was killed by Bai Ye from the thatched hut." Bai Ye? Who is that? After hearing the explanation, Biking finally understood that Bai Ye was one of the immortal seedlings who had entered the sect yesterday. How is this possible? Did you all stop cultivating? Biking was incredulous, but chose to put the matter aside for the time being. Regardless, you will now come with me to the main hall to pay homage to the sect leaders and elders of each grotto heaven, Biking said. As for Bai Ye, although she didn't know what had happened, his fellow disciples at the Life Spring realm were all dead, and his cultivation wasn't much higher. She wasn't confident she could defeat him. So she would return to report and ask the sect leader for a decision. Taking all the disciples except Bai Ye with her, Biking transformed into a flying rainbow and arrived at the main hall. The people there were already impatient. Seeing the disciples arrive, the elder's brows relaxed slightly, and then he asked, "Biking, where's Yang Xia, junior brother Yang?" "He was killed by Bai Ye, the newly promoted immortal seed yesterday," Biking reported truthfully. "You mean that immortal yesterday?" the elder said incredulously. "Wasn't that just immortal with no cultivation at all? How could he possibly kill Yang Xia, crossing two realms?" Chapter 324 Loudly inform, capture Bai Ye. Inside the main hall of Lingsu Cave Heaven, everyone stared in astonishment at Biking, who had returned with the news. Even those from other cave heavens were equally astonished. What was this guy saying? An ordinary person who had only entered yesterday had crossed two major realms and single-handedly killed a Life Spring realm cultivator? Unheard of. Absolutely unheard of, completely incomprehensible. This was even more outrageous than the bitter sea killing the other shore. Don't try to deceive us with nonsense. How could a mortal kill a cultivator? The Lingsu Cave Heaven sect master's face darkened as he sternly ordered, "Tell us the truth immediately." Faced with the sect master's question, Biking felt uncertain and said guiltily, reporting to the sect master, "This disciple didn't actually witness junior brother Yang's death." He pointed to Yifan and the others beside him, shifting the blame. "These junior brothers told me. They said junior brother Yang was killed by Bai Ye. Perhaps even they were deceived by the villains." These words immediately put pressure on Yifan. Facing the stares of the various cave heaven sect masters and elders, cold sweat poured down his body. Looking at these powerful figures whose strength was almost at the Dao Palace realm, most ordinary people were already struggling to weigh whether or not to tell the truth. Finally, under immense pressure, a middle-aged man respectfully stepped forward and said, reporting to the sect leader, "That Bai Ye is different from what you know. He already possessed cultivation before joining the sect." "What did you say?" The sect leader was even more incredulous at the man's accusation. If he had cultivation, it should have been discovered during yesterday's aptitude test. Reporting to the sect leader, "That's indeed the case. I personally witnessed Bai Ye kick someone into the bloody mist. Perhaps he used some kind of sorcery to deceive the sect," the man truthfully stated. "Moreover, those sacred waters and fruits in the desolate ancient forbidden land were found by Bai Ye, along with Yifan and Pangbo." As he spoke, while Yifan's expression changed drastically, the man continued to reveal, "It seems that Bai Ye already knew where to find the sacred waters and fruits. He also already knew that the five-colored altar we encountered would lead to the completion of the desolate ancient forbidden land. He knows everything within the forbidden land like the back of his hand." A deathly silence fell. Everyone present was stunned by the man's report. Most of them stared intently at the man who spoke, their eyes filled with greed and scrutiny. Meanwhile, the elders and sect leaders of Lingsu Cave Heaven were all filled with rage. That rage wasn't directed at Bai Ye, but at the man before them. "What's your name?" "State it," the sect leader shouted sternly. Reporting to the sect leader, "This disciple is Liu Yunzi. I came out of the desolate ancient forbidden land yesterday with Bai Ye and the others." Liu Yunzi was secretly pleased, thinking he had done a great service by reporting ahead of time. "Good, very good." The sect leader's gaze was cold and piercing as he stared intently at the self-righteous fellow before him. "It seems you concealed too much information from our sect when you joined. Such a two-faced, liar person's words cannot be trusted, and rashly reporting a fellow disciple has already violated the sect rules. As he spoke, the sect leader suddenly waved his hand, and a stream of fire rose from his sleeve, rapidly approaching Liu Yunzi's wide-eyed gaze, but was blocked by a slender hand. Sect leader Li, don't be anxious. If you think what he said is false, this old man happens to know a little about the art of soul-searching. An elderly man with a plain face, white beard, and youthful appearance stood in front of Liu Yunzi, chuckling. Liu Yunzi, now protected, was filled with the fear of death. He had no idea why the sect leader wanted to kill him after revealing such a crucial secret. He was completely unaware of the situation inside the hall. There were not only people from Lingsu Cave Heaven present, but also a group of high-ranking members from other sects who were eyeing the scene with predatory intent. It was also the fault of the two messengers who had been so perfunctory, failing to explain their purpose to Liu Yunzi. He had foolishly assumed everyone present was one of their own, feeling completely safe. But in the eyes of the people from Lingsu Cave Heaven, Liu Yunzi was a traitor, revealing such a bombshell in front of so many hostile forces. If it was false, that would be one thing, but what if it was true? The heavenly soldiers of Yaoguang Holy Land hadn't arrived yet. They didn't have the confidence to fight against so many. The sect leader, who had initially intended to grimace, looked at the elder of Jingsha Cave Heaven blocking Liu Yunzi's path and said, "He's just a liar, there's no need to waste your energy. Hey, we have plenty of time, and I'm quite interested in what he's talking about." The Jingsha Cave Heaven elder chuckled. Upon hearing this, the other elders and sect leaders from the other cave heavens echoed him with warm smiles. These people present today had truly had their fill of gossip. They knew so many great secrets. If everything was true, even a small portion could make them incredibly wealthy. Knowing the situation was hopeless, sect leader Li said dejectedly, "Since that's the case, let's do as you all say. Search this scoundrel's soul and spirit to uncover all the secrets. If it's true, we can explore it together." Exactly. Exactly, everyone echoed, but no one knew what they were truly thinking. And so, under Liu Yunzi's terrified gaze, many elders and sect leaders skilled in soul-searching stepped forward. Countless hands pressed down on his forehead, relentlessly searching Liu Yunzi's memories, causing him to scream in agony. The faces of everyone else present wore expressions of utter disgust, as if they had swallowed a dead child. The players, in particular, hated Liu Yunzi with a passion. Liu Yunzi felt as if his very soul was being scraped by steel blades, his spirit about to explode, yet he was forcibly held down by those present, his agonizing screams escaping his lips. Earth, mythology, Yinghe, Dalian Temple, Ji Shui, Buddhist artifacts, player power, Bai Ye's words. The more they searched, the more solemn their expressions became. The information was simply too terrifying, containing an overwhelming amount of knowledge. Incredibly terrifying. The world these people inhabit is remarkably similar to ours. Is this a coincidence, or was it crafted by an ancient, powerful being? The Buddhist artifact in the Great Thunderclap Temple, though damaged, is undoubtedly a treasure of at least the level of a great being. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That world is on a different path from ours. The pronouncements between their various ideologies are truly resounding. After exposing Liu Yunzi's true nature, everyone present understood the value of these people, especially the players. The Lingsu sect master gave the players a meaningful look. The Buddhist artifacts these people retrieved from the Great Thunderclap Temple contained supernatural powers, but unfortunately, they were hidden away as soon as they left the forbidden area and not brought back to their grotto heaven. "Everyone, the situation is urgent. Let's capture Bai Ye first," one of them said. Chapter 325 The formula for trenches is still chasing me. That's only right, the Lingsu Cave Heaven sect master nodded repeatedly. They couldn't let Bai Ye escape. With that, the Lingsu Cave Heaven sect master pointed his sword at the disciples and said, "Bai King, you stay here and guard these disciples. I'll deal with them when I return." The most important thing now was, of course, to capture Bai Ye first and interrogate him properly. Having decided on their direction, the sect masters and elders present exchanged glances and said, "Fellow Daoists, let's capture this scoundrel together." Even without his command, they would follow, chanting in unison, "That's only right." As they spoke, the more than 30 people from the 6 major cave heavens of the Yan Kingdom transformed into streams of light and fled out of the hall. Among these people, at least the elders were at the Divine Bridge realm, and the strongest were the sect masters of the various cave heavens, barely stepping out of the Sea of Wheels realm to reach the first level of the Dao Palace. At this moment, for Bai Ye, this guy who possessed a great secret, they all mobilized. Beneath their fleeing light, their momentum was immense, each transforming into rainbow, heading towards the low mountain where Bai Ye was. The disciples within the grotto looked up, astonished by the massive scene. What could possibly warrant such a grand commotion? The streaks of light moved with incredible speed, arriving from the main hall to the sky above the low hill in mere seconds. The hill, no more than 100 meters high, was dotted with several thatched huts. As soon as they hovered above it, they sensed a faint, ominous, scarlet aura emanating from one of the huts. Truly a prodigy, commented an elder from Jade Cauldron Grotto, then took the lead, declaring, "I'll capture this scoundrel." As he spoke, a blinding white light shone from his palm, a gleaming white jade bracelet, resembling a small sun from afar. He thrust his hands forward with tremendous force, sending the bracelet hurtling towards Bai Ye's hut. Like a falling meteor, the mere impact caused the vegetation to tremble, as if about to shatter. Inside the hut, Bai Ye stood like a rock, sensing the approaching danger. The jade bracelet, now several feet wide, easily pierced through the thatched hut, about to imprison Bai Ye. Bai Ye remained motionless, his right arm suddenly rising, attempting to withstand the artifact refined by the elder of the other shore realm with a single arm. Clang! In an instant, fist and artifact collided. A terrifying sonic boom exploded, forming a visible white ring of air that ripped outwards in layers. Wherever it passed, the ground within a radius of tens of meters was completely overturned. The surrounding thatched huts shattered into tiny fragments in an instant, but Bai Ye remained unmoved. The sect leader of Lingsu Cave Heaven, dressed in a Taoist robe, stroked his beard and said, just as that scoundrel Liu Yunzi said, he used a concealment technique to hide his cultivation level and infiltrated the Cave Heaven. His strength is considerable. Fortunately, he was discovered in time, otherwise the consequences would have been unimaginable. Bai Ye opened his eyes, got off the bed, and looked around at the 36 cultivators who had dispersed, completely blocking the area. He couldn't help but wonder, quite a few have come. But does Lingsu Cave Heaven of the Mirian Kingdom have so many Taoist cultivators in the sky? The elders of Lingsu Cave Heaven were still cursing, traitor. Even now, you still won't surrender. You've entered the sect. Bai Ye didn't care about their words at all. They were just NPCs in a game, he could skip their words like cutscenes. For Bai Ye, who treated this world as a game, although he didn't know why so many elders had surrounded him after he only killed one disciple, he only needed to know one thing: kill all the monsters attacking him with red names above their heads. As long as I kill fast enough, trouble won't find me. Thinking this, Bai Ye's lips curled into a chilling smile, revealing his white teeth. Within his body, the only wheel of life radiated divine light, its blinding brilliance piercing through the four-dimensional sea of blood-red bitterness, reflecting rolling waves of blood. How is this possible? A cultivator at most at the Life Spring realm? How can he possess such a terrifying aura, even exhibiting extraordinary phenomena? Someone exclaimed in surprise, watching the blood engulf everything. Don't panic, everyone. This child hasn't even reached the Dao Palace realm, he's merely a phantom, an elder reassured them, but the next moment, he was so frightened that he hurriedly dodged. Below, Bai Ye slashed his hands fiercely at the crowd in the sky, his four-dimensional sea of bitterness within him unleashing its power. An incomparably sharp red light burst forth, a rainbow stretching for miles straight into the sky, nearly cleaving the elder who had spoken in two. Looking at the azure sky behind the split clouds, the cultivators' faces were filled with solemnity. Gentlemen, this trouble is difficult to eliminate. There's no need for fairness when facing such evil forces. Let's all unite and attack, an elder roared, and a multitude responded. In the blink of an eye, everyone surrounded Bai Ye below. Hands formed hand seals, and terrifying divine light, sacrificial artifacts, and intricate Taoist techniques erupted from their hands, transforming into 5 colored pillars of light that blasted towards Bai Ye. The sky was ablaze with boundless light, carrying terrifying radiance as it bombarded down from all directions. A combined attack from dozens of cultivators at the Divine Bridge level and above, plus 4 cultivators at the first level of the Dao Palace, if it landed, would reduce the entire hill to dust, leaving nothing but barren land within 1,000 meters. Seeing this, the cultivators in the sky momentarily regretted their actions, fearing they had gone too far and shattered the young man on the spot. Bai Ye below sneered, neither dodging nor flinching, preparing to meet the attack head-on. The bitter sea within his body shone brightly once more, displaying various extraordinary phenomena. Within the four-dimensional sea of suffering, 99 layers of bitter sea power surged towards the sky with immense force. Each sea of suffering contained a different aura, yet these emanating auras were familiar to the cultivators. Within the 13th layer of bitter sea, blue light coalesced into a beam, directly striking the pillar of light of the Lingsu Cave Heaven sect leader, causing his expression to contort. This is my universal aurora. In the 3 layers of bitter sea, snow-white radiance intertwined, colliding and roaring with a golden ancient bell, while a female cultivator beside her exclaimed in horror, "This is my myriad snow heavenly splendor, from the 5 seas of suffering." Spiritual energy surged, condensing in the air into a jet-black ancient sword, thrusting towards the ancient seal in the sky, my demonic light ascending dragon sword. In the horrified gazes of these cultivators, the divine abilities they had just condensed were instantly copied by the youth sea of suffering, then layered upon each other, retaliating with the same force. How is this possible? How is this possible? Even a great emperor couldn't achieve this level of talent, an elder murmured in disbelief. Each and every supernatural power and spell here was the result of months of meticulous and arduous training. How could they possibly be understood at a mere glance? It was unbelievable, but it was the truth. These supernatural powers and spells worked like this. Bai Ye only needed to use them directly, while the elders and sect leaders needed to study them for a long time. Seeing this incomprehensible genius, the cultivators, whose Dao hearts were almost shattered, witnessed Bai Ye's copied Dao techniques colliding with their attacks. Then, blinding light scattered out, and they were undeniably annihilated by Bai Ye. This copy. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.